Hello, everyone, and welcome to another small screen Star Wars. As always, I'm Julian Mush. I'm joined by Rachel Wilkinson.
Hi.
Hello. And we are going to, I don't know, I'm trying to find new fun ways to start the show, and it's not working.
I
I'm
like
just going to go
throwing
back
Julian
to,
off with different greetings every once in a while. Also, I'm
yeah,
sick, everybody. I'm sorry. I caught Julian's cold through the computer.
it's a computer virus.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm
That's where we need
fortunate.
the gonk sound, is when you make bad jokes.
Oh, yeah, you know what? You're right. Hold on. Let me play that. Hold on. It's right here.
Yeah.
All right. I'm happy with that. What was I saying? Oh yeah. I am fully healed since last week. I am happy and healthy. The technical issues are largely gone, so perfect timing for the finale of the Star Wars season. With, I guess, what is it? What's the Jude Law show coming soon? It's the Skeleton Crew. That's next on the docket. But
I didn't know Jude Law was in it.
yeah,
I haven't been paying attention.
That's all that really matters. It's Jude Law and a bunch of kids, is my understanding, is the cast.
Weird.
That's the official cast. Jude Law and a bunch of kids.
Jude Law and a bunch of kids.
Yeah.
When does that come out?
You're already asking me questions that I should know the answer to.
Terrible
Skeleton Crew premiere date. I don't know if there is. It just says 2023. So
okay, well, there's not many months left in that, so get it together, guys.
Yeah, I guess maybe December.
Yeah, I guess
that's my best guess at this point. We'll see. I always like a little bit of Star Wars around Christmas.
That's
just
true.
feels right, you know. Anyway, the point of this episode is to talk about Ahsoka. We're going to be covering the season finale of Ahsoka, episode 8, or part 8 as they like to call it. I really wish they would find a unifying naming convention or numbering convention for this. It's like we've got chapters, we've got parts, we've got episodes.
Yeah.
I maybe there isn't a way to do that, considering all the different, they already used episodes for the movies, which is
yeah, exactly,
already confusing. So I don't know. Maybe this is just it's a battle that cannot be won, but it is confusing. So
they use episode though in the Clone Wars and the Rebels animated stuff.
Right. So again, there's no consistency. That's the problem. A little bit of internal consistency was all we're all looking for here.
I like when they use part. I like the part 1, part 2. I don't know. I like it.
It makes it feel like it's a part of a larger thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. I also don't mind chapters.
Chapters is cool too.
I don't know why we felt like we needed to use part is new relatively. I don't know why that was felt like they needed to use that for Ahsoka, but whatever. Anyway, this is part 8, the Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord. Not to be confused with the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe.
Cute
which
title,
of course,
though.
Which is, I think, is what they're drawing allusion to.
Yeah.
Obviously, they're the whole season's had a lot of Lord of the Rings references. Obviously, the Lion, the Witch, and Wardrobe is a Narnia book, so just to I do know the difference.
I was like, what? I'm like, what does Lord of the Rings have to do with Narnia?
But the writer of both, obviously J.R.R. Tolkien and C.S. Lewis, who was the writer of the Narnia books, they were friends. So there's some connections there. Fantasy storytelling.
It's the most. Sorry. I'm just we're watching Star Wars, but it's kind of referencing Lord of the Rings, and it was written by J.R.R. Tolkien, and he's friends with this guy. That's too many.
Well, also, I think it's more of just fantasy storytelling in general, right?
Yeah,
this whole season's been very traditional Western fantasy style storytelling from the beginning. So I don't think that's a mistake. That is maybe a bit of a stretch. That specific line of thinking, but yeah, I think it's more directly, if you want to boil it down to its component parts, it's about the connection between Star Wars that Star Wars has with fantasy storytelling, right? It's this combination of sci-fi and fantasy, right? Or science fantasy, whatever. That's another way of putting it. So that's kind of the connection there, I think, for that title.
Yeah, I thought it was kind of I don't know, in a cute way, because in the last episode we were talking about like the storytelling of the Jedis, and like that this
Sure.
this whole planet, this whole place is supposed to be a place of storytelling, of like where the stories are from, right? And I don't know, Narnia is also a story. You know what I'm getting at. I'm very tired.
Yeah, that's okay. I've been going all day, like with work. It's been wild. So if we get completely burnt out by the end of this, it's not because we don't care. It's just because our brains have literally shut down on us. It's not. Yeah,
I was telling Julian earlier, my baby is also sick too, so he was up every hour and a half to 2 hours last night, just being mad. So
lucky you.
I'm tired.
Who needs sleep?
I mean, not ever again. Apparently.
Yeah, exactly. Right?
I did it to myself.
So I guess just obviously the component parts of the title. The Jedi, it says the Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord. So I'm guessing it's Ahsoka, it's Morgan, and it's Thrawn as the Warlord here. I don't think there's any, unless there's other interpretations that you can think of.
No.
No, let's not be crazy here. No, that is obviously what it is. Okay, I'm glad we're on the same page there. The log line is the heroes race to prevent Grad Admiral Thrawn's escape. I think that's very to the point and largely accurate, so no real gripes with the logline this week. Directed by Rick Famuyiwa, written by Dave Filoni. Rick Famuyiwa, obviously, at this point, has been in the Star Wars directing wheel for a while now. Director of Dope, but also directed 8 episodes of The Mandalorian at this point, which is quite a lot, actually. Yeah. And has done some Lost and some other stuff. But yeah, a veteran Star Wars television director at this point for Rick Famuyiwa. I did see some people complaining and maybe a little bit about the direction of this episode, feeling a little bit less weighty than previous, like particularly with the action sequences. But typically Famuyiwa has been good with action, so I don't really see that in this episode. I think there is some stuff that is a little clunky, but largely I don't think that's all on Rick. So, but I have heard that, so I didn't want to mention it. But I don't think it's fair necessarily.
Yeah, I would not say that at all.
And obviously, again, the whole season's been written by Dave Filoni, so there's no change there. All right, before we get into our overall impressions, our scene-by-scene recap, and then a little bit of conversation of look back on the season as a whole and some predictions for what we assume will be Ahsoka Season 2, or at least whatever the future of this storyline is. We have some just simple house cleaning to do, so follow us on Twitter at Tower Babblecast, Facebook.com/Tower Babblecast. We record live. Well, this will be the last week that we're recording live. So if you're missing this right now, you're going to have to wait until we come back for our next series or next bonus episode. We weren't great with the bonus episodes before, but that was only because Rachel was having a kid. So
yeah, sorry.
Now this time we may be able to do something. There's some stuff that we need to catch up on anyway. So we'll see if what we can squeeze in between these series. Although it is, I got to admit, sometimes pretty nice to have the time off, because then I can get other episodes. I can get regular episodes of the podcast in and all that kind of stuff. So again, if you aren't following us on our main feed, the Tower of Babel podcast feed, make sure you're doing that on whatever podcast player of choice that you prefer. Speaking of which, I should mention we got a really nice review / comment. I guess it's a review. That's I don't know nice. What you would call it. On Spotify last 2 weeks ago. I'm going to pull it up here because I want to read it. And I won't say who it's from. But I'll just say that it is someone I feel like we have seen around before. So appreciate their support. You know who you are because we're going to read it right now. So this was, I guess, technically when I sent this to you, that comment had come in 3 days ago at that time, and that was on Thursday last week. So Tuesday last week. Anyway, it says, the hosts are just amazing. I constantly laugh with them and enjoy their input a lot. I look forward to each new episode more than any other podcast. Don't ever stop what you are doing. So, hey, thank you. That's really kind comment. And as Rachel kindly pointed out, not from one of the people we know in real life. So
yeah, it's always nice to get compliments like that from people that don't, that aren't our friends, in day-to-day life. So
right, it feels
like
more.
It wasn't my mom, so it's like, right. Thank you.
we can assume they're not just being nice because they know us.
Because they know us, yeah, exactly. Actually, it doesn't surprise me because our friends aren't that nice in real life anyway, so they would never. Our real friends would never leave.
They would tell us if we were crappy.
Yeah, exactly.
Anyway, it's really nice. If you want to leave a comment similar on iTunes or Spotify or wherever, I would be happy to read it on the air. And it's even, we're always going to happy to take 5-star reviews. I really don't know how much it actually helps the show or not, but it's just nice to read. It's nice to know about it. Yeah, it doesn't hurt. It's not going to hurt.
Better than a 1-star review.
Yeah, don't leave those.
We can't handle it. Yeah.
Just send an email, towerbabblepodcast@gmail.com if you want to.
I don't have to read those, so send those to Julian.
Sounds good. Those come directly to me, or DM me on Twitter @towerbabblecast.
Ooh, yeah, that's a good way to get them riled up.
That's right. Oh, there's so much stuff to rile me up on X these days /Twitter.
Is that what it's called now? I refuse to download it, to get the new one, so mine still has the Twitter bird.
Oh, really? You haven't updated it?
No, I'm not updating it. I like the little bird.
I didn't have a choice. It just happened for me. You haven't opened it in that long?
I open Twitter all the time. I just don't have to update it. I don't know.
That's weird. Okay, well,
it hasn't made me yet. It probably.
I guess maybe you don't. Maybe you have automatic updates turned off. That's possible.
I do have that turned off. Yeah.
Okay, so I had mine. Anyway, mine's X now. I still call it Twitter. Most people still do. This is our small act of defiance against the man. The man being Elon Musk. Okay, so a couple other things. Patreon. We have a Patreon page to help support the show. I don't want to hammer this too much on the last episode, but we did just recently do, as a part of our Patreon exclusive film club, we just did City Slickers 2, The Legend of Curly's Gold. We're going to be doing, for Spooktober, we're going to be doing Donnie Darko. So if you're interested in doing a film club with us, you can join our Patreon, patreon.com/TowerBabbleCast. And lastly, head over to our website, towerbabble.ca, for everything that we do. I don't think I'm forgetting anything. Other than that, it is now into spoiler zone. I mean, kind of already into spoiler zone, but in case you may have not known, we're going to cover everything scene by scene here. So don't be surprised if we talk about the things that happened in Star Wars. Not just this episode, not just this season of Ahsoka, but Star Wars in general. So be prepared for that. Okay. Let's get into it because we have lots to cover. It's a 43-minute episode, I think. It's not the longest episode of the season. Felt like it had the right amount of time. I didn't feel like I was shortchanged.
No.
And I think that's good, but very dense, lots to cover. Although also lots of action, so which allows us to skip over big chunks of the episode without having to break down every single saber swipe. Yes. So that's nice as well. So we'll try to keep the episode under 2 hours, around 2 hours. That's been about our sweet spot lately, and we'll try to maintain that. All right, let's get into it. So, what are your overall impressions of this episode?
Yeah, okay. So I thought there was a lot of things I really liked. There was some spooky stuff that I was a big fan of because I think we need more of that in Star Wars. I also really enjoyed some of the action scenes. And I mean, overall, here's the thing. I'm hoping we get either a second season or something else comes from this because I don't feel like the story has been fully told.
Right.
Obviously. So I'm just, they kind of left it not necessarily on like a cliffhanger, but kind of like it's, there's still more story to be told. So, I mean, it's hard for me to fully evaluate it because I just feel like I don't have all the info yet. But I liked it. It was a good episode. I just want more.
We'll have to touch on this more closer to the end, but there's a lot of question marks about where we go from here.
Yeah.
I also really enjoyed it. This one packed a punch emotionally for me, both the very last moment, but also earlier in the episode. I want to believe in my heart of hearts that I'm not just like a sucker for nostalgia bait. I think it's more than that. I really do. But I guess we'll have to explore my feelings in real time
Yeah.
as we go through this. But I think
I teared up in this episode.
I 100% did. I think I had some tears coming down as the really awesome new music that was at the at the end for the credits played. Really loved that. We'll talk about that more closer to the end as well. But really strong emotional beats. I think it does the job of showing the audience that Thrawn can actually win.
Yeah.
Which I think we talked about earlier is important, right? He can't just be losing all the time. And the truth is that we can talk about all of his accomplishments and about how he's different and all that stuff, but it's all just talk unless we see it. Rebels had a lot of us basically just talking around how brilliant he is. He did have a few wins, but I think still, and even in that case, not as much as I think people would have liked to have seen.
Right.
So now we put him into a position where he not only succeeds in his mission in this week, but also now is positioned to strike back against the New Republic and see how his tactical genius, quote unquote genius, is actually able to inflict real damage and real fear onto the New Republic as it exists. So that's interesting. And by the way, I will say it is pretty wild to learn that Thrawn comes back, because we speculated this would be the case, but that Thrawn comes back, wages a war against the New Republic, and then they still completely demilitarize and get blown up in Force Awakens. I guess that's still 20 years from now, 20 or 30 years from now. But still, that is really wild. So really no lessons learned from the past by this group. I really liked some of the concepts they introduce in this finale that are still open-ended threads. One of them being this idea of Sabine as being someone that could grow into being a dangerous, a threat. That's really interesting. We'll explore that in more detail as we get to that scene. Obviously, basically everything from the epilogue. So whatever Balin is staring at off of that super cool Lord of the Rings inspired statue. What's Shin gonna do with this group of bandits? How does she play into this? How much are we gonna get to see Ezra interacting with maybe existing characters that the Lukes and Hans of the world that we know? That kind of thing. Those kind of things are really left in an interesting place. And then plus we have now Ahsoka in this really much more matured or centered emotional place. What does that mean? There's a lot of that stuff that I think is really interesting. Action wise, I think largely most of it works. Some of it looks a little bit silly. I think.
Really?
But,
okay.
Yeah, I don't know. When there's a moment where I think it would just look better in animation, where they're fighting against a bunch of zombie stormtroopers, and they keep dying and coming back, and the constantly closing doors, and it's the. I think what it is that it's the sabers that they're using to deflect these blasts. There's so many blasts coming that it just looks like they're waving their sabers around willy nilly, and it kind of looks a little silly. That's
gotcha. Okay.
Something a little bit more precise. I feel like the movements being a little bit more precise, I think lends to this air of kind of mastery that we don't necessarily get to see as much here. I don't know. It's just maybe I'm nitpicking, but I think it's largely works. I think the music is really, really good in this episode. I think Kevin Kiner crushes it. So yeah, I thought it really nailed the Star Wars tone. We talked about this all season, how certain things that are sometimes hard to define create this familiar Star Wars feeling. And I think there's a lot of that in this episode too. So yeah, overall, pretty good. Okay, let's get into the scene by scene. Although, actually, you know what? Before we do that, something we haven't been doing as much of lately, but I want to read this, which is a user review from IMDb. This one is a 10 out of 10 review written by Wesley Peter Redmond.
Okay,
all one word.
Name.
Yeah, Wesley Peter Redmond, all one word. And the title of it is just awesome. That's what it says. Awesome. So it says this as follows. There's only a few words that could describe such an episode as this, and I choose to use awesome. I really like the sequel trilogy. Rogue One and Solo were great. I love The Mandalorian. The Book of Boba Fett was pretty good. Andor wasn't quite my cup of tea, but it was fine. And I immensely enjoyed Obi-Wan Kenobi. But which is funny that he just like name drops every single Star Wars thing. Doesn't mention the prequels or sequels though, or the original trilogy. But that's interesting.
Yeah.
But nothing has thrilled me more than this episode. I didn't want to get my hopes up for this show, but it definitely did not disappoint. I can't wait for next season, and I can't wait to see what they will do next in Star Wars. The story they're setting up in their shows is going to be awesome. Yeah, lots of the. Oh, and then last, may the Force be with you always, which is nice. It's fun. I just thought I read that earlier, and I thought it was so off the wall. I just wanted to read it.
There's a lot going on in that review.
Really nothing about the show, just that they really liked it and that they can't wait for the next season. There's no confirmation there's even going to be a season 2.
Yeah,
so,
which is wild to me because that's kind of what Adam and I were wondering. I'm like, so is there a season 2 or is this like leading up to like a movie or I don't know. I guess
we know there's a movie coming.
Right.
This Heir of the Empire film
yeah.
that Dave Filoni's going to do. Is this supposed to lead directly into that, or is there more coming before we get to that movie? Because that movie hasn't started production, and that's years away before that would come out. So
that's what I mean. Yeah, that's what I was thinking too. And yeah, I don't know. I guess we'll see, but yeah,
I don't know. I think we'll find out in the next few weeks. They might announce a second season.
That's true.
Who knows?
They could already be working on it, and we just don't know about it. So,
well, now they can. Now that the writer's strike is over.
Right.
So let's get into this recap. We start at the witch's castle, for lack of a better term. And Morgan Elsbeth is there. She's reporting to Thrawn that the cargo transfer is complete. So whatever they've been moving out of the catacombs is now fully into the ISD, and they're ready to leave, basically. Enoch also has a report. They're tracking the Jedi ship, and in which case they dispatch 2 TIE fighters to engage if they find it. Right? Just say, if they see anything, feel free to start shooting. Morgan feels confident that they have the upper hand on the Jedi, that nothing that they can do at this point can stop them. But Thrawn is more cautious. He's less certain than that. He says, I've seen many an Imperial officer make the same assumptions about the rebellion. Even I fell victim to the heroics of a single Jedi. And then he has this really cool line where he says, never again.
Yeah.
Which I think is famous last words, I think, there. Grand Admiral.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. I really liked his cautionary. I've enjoyed all season the ability to have this kind of have Thrawn bounce off of Morgan. Morgan, who has this kind of much more traditional imperial cutthroat ambition, and kind of like belief in that what they're doing is right and cannot fail. Whereas Thrawn's just always been more measured than that. And so, in Rebels, it was always like, some captain or, Governor Price or whoever, some Imperial officer who's kind of taking the rebellion for granted or whatever.
Yes, yeah.
Right. And it's always has to be Thrawn who's like, hey, chill your, cool your jets there. This isn't a guaranteed victory. And having that be something that we get as a kind of a continued thing here through Morgan has been entertaining for me all season. Mm-hmm. R.I.P. Morgan, though. So we'll have to find another Imperial lackey to have him yell at. Any thoughts about his kind of like his? He also, by the way, calls out the fact that he says he too fell victim to the heroics of a single Jedi. I think obviously referencing when Ezra sucked him into this galaxy for the first time. Anyway, any other thoughts on kind of this comment?
No, I like the reference to that, right? Like he is learning from his mistakes and he's not going to underestimate them like he has in the past. So and it makes him, as we kind of said before, it makes him a smarter villain, which we don't get to see as much with the Imperials. So yeah, I like that they're running with the whole feeling of him being so much smarter than everybody else.
Sure. Well, I think they really need to hammer it home for the people who don't know Thrawn. So
exactly,
it helps.
Yeah.
Thrawn then turns to the Great Mothers. He wants to express his gratitude with their partnership. They feel similarly and also want to honor Morgan Elsbeth for her great work. Morgan Elsbeth, who basically did all of this work on whispers that she heard in her dreams, like a crazy person, and it all paid off for her. So she gets a gift of shadows, and they do this ceremony, and they kind of chant as they approach her, and they make her take a pledge. They say she needs to pledge to the sisterhood, to the magics, to the old ways. They ask her to abandon her old life. They ask her for her loyalty and her life. I really like the way that it's very witchy, and like again traditional magic type of spell casting. Then there's this crazy like soul tornado, green flame tornado thing that happens, and they conjure up this cool new sword called what's it called? It's called the Blade of Talzin.
Yeah, sorry,
Blade
of Talzin. Yeah,
which is really cool. We have?
Yes, we have.
Okay, tell me more.
Okay, do you remember? It's a really kind of annoying episode in Clone Wars, so I would understand.
The droid episode, or is it
no,
Jar Jar
it's
episode?
Not. It's a Jar Jar episode.
Ugh.
It's the episode with Jar Jar and Mace, and they go to that planet, and
yes, I do remember that.
Yeah, and Mother Talzin is there basically, and she's that other alien's name, Julie, and she's all like in love with Jar Jar. She kind of looks like Jar Jar, but not. I don't know. She kind of looks like a duck.
Yes, I do remember her. She's like purple, I think.
Yeah, kind of. But anyways, like her life force gets stolen by Mother Talzin and put in this orb, and she's like strung up on a big altar, almost like in Indiana Jones.
Yes, I remember the episode being very Indiana Jones. I'm pretty sure they run away from a boulder at some point.
Yeah. Pretty much, yeah. But anyways, Mace Windu fights Mother Talzin and kills her, but she uses that like green flame blade.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
To fight him, because it can, as we see later, it can
stop a lightsaber.
Stop lightsabers, yeah. Very cool, very witchy. I like the scene a lot. I especially liked, I don't know, I like the creepiness that they use with the Great Mothers, where when she goes up to Morgan Elsbeth's face and her hands jerk really quickly, it's got that like little bit of like horror movie kind of feel to it.
Yeah,
and,
yeah.
Like, grabbing her face and then
it's
I don't
burning.
Know,
it's like this green burning, and then I guess it's like, is the burning? It leaves these like gray marks on her face. Are those supposed to be like the same, like similar marks that they have on their face?
Yeah, it's like that's how she gets turned into like almost like a Great Mother, or she gets turned into like the witch, like a witch, like
right? A true witch, or like a
Because I don't think she has some of their like magic abilities, but not all. I don't think so. I think this is kind of just imbuing more of that dark magic into her.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously not shot like a horror movie, nor that I would expect it to, but it's like it certainly it has the and this is like right at the beginning of the episode, and it's like we're right into this like, okay, we have this little meeting, and okay, here's this magic ceremony where people's faces get burned, their eyes turn black, and a sword is conjured from fire. So it's pretty cool. I mean, again, as I said when we found out that Morgan Elsbeth was herself a witch of Dathomir, that I was skeptical that the like Mother Talzin-esque witches would work in live action, and I'm happy to report that I was wrong.
They do
and
work,
I'm actually they actually do work quite well. The other thing which we haven't really talked about is that and by the way, I never did get the chance to watch the Screen Crush recap before we recorded this, so this will be a rare one while not referencing it constantly.
Oh.
Did you watch it? I haven't.
I did not watch it.
Okay. So maybe there's just references we're just gonna miss. That's just what a shame. But I think we're usually pretty good on our own. What was I saying? About the witches.
The witches in live action.
Yeah, it's just nice that it works. And the other thing was that we talked about this before with very beginning when they're talking about the threads of fate and all these comments. I don't think we've called it out explicitly, but the Great Mothers are named after the Greek fates. So there's like a direct line there. It's not just like what a nice similarity. We were pretty spot on that one. So we got to give ourselves a pat on the back for that at least.
I didn't realize they had names. I guess is it just listed in the?
Yeah, let's see here. That's Clothau, Actrapa, and Lachesis.
Oh, cool. Yeah, because they never really have said their names, but
they've got.
No, it's cool.
Their names do sound vaguely Greek, I guess. In the I'm sure I'm saying that wrong, by the way, and I apologize for to the Greeks listening.
I have a Greek friend. He's probably raging right now.
Yeah.
So. Yeah.
You know, my Big Fat Greek Wedding was written by a Winnipegger, so you know, I think we have some sort of like pass for something. I don't know how that works.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, going back to this whole scene in general, I just liked how spooky it was and creepy it was. I don't know. I want to see. We've said it before, but like Star Wars should do some kind of horror type episode. It'd be or like movie or something. It'd be very cool because I like the spooky aspect and getting a little dark.
I think we'll get that. I mean, we've seen it in the Clone Wars and stuff where they do the zombies or they do other like horror-esque things. Godzilla. So it's like, not that Godzilla's horror, but you know what I mean. Like they do these genres. Yeah. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see it and they really lean into it for an episode. I mean, they did the spider episode in Mandalorian, and that one gives me the heebie-jeebies. So yeah. Okay, I guess just other kind of other thoughts on this. You know, the pledge that they make her take to the sisterhood, to the magics, to the old ways. You know, I think that all makes sense. But then they ask her to abandon her old life, and ask for her loyalty. And she does provide those things, but she does also seem to have a little bit of hesitancy, a little bit in there. And we see it even a little bit later when she's asked to basically sacrifice herself. Right. For the greater good, that she's like she'll do it, but I think she does question it a little bit. So I think that is interesting. It's pretty cool. All right, so we get the Blade of Talzin, and then we see this really cool shot of Thrawn, looking very pleased with himself as the 2 TIE fighters that he earlier dispatched fly out overhead. So that's a pretty cool shot. Then cut to title card, and that's when we see the title, the Jedi, the Witch, and the Warlord for the first time, before coming to the Toady Caravan, and we pick up with our heroes there. And the T6 floats gently overhead as the Toady Caravan continues its migration to wherever they're going to next to set up their next trailer park. And meanwhile, inside, Ezra and Huyang, I love this scene. It might be my favorite scene in the whole episode.
It's so
Ezra
good.
and Huyang construct him a new lightsaber. And so there's some bickering back and forth about each other's systems or methods or lack thereof, right? He's saying like that it's all a mess in here, but Huyang has a system. He says he has a system. He's like, you don't have anything like a system. It's a method, which is just really like it's a funny like semantic argument, which is classic droid stuff.
I was gonna say that's such a droid thing to do.
Right. And they start talking about how the different parts of lightsabers. Oh, this blade emitter is not the right size; it's too narrow, et cetera, et cetera. And I love how Huyang is like, hey, I have been teaching younglings how to make lightsabers for forever. And I love how Ezra's response is, yeah, that's great, but I don't have time for a lesson right now.
Yeah. Again, right on point with Ezra. Like, that's just his total attitude.
Impatience. Yeah. And then, I don't know, I just loved seeing Huyang using his second set of arms to, like, pick through stuff in the cabinets, just like we saw in the Clone Wars. Like, his little second set of arms in that show were purely for grabbing stuff. Whereas we get to see him use them for fighting in this show, but fun to see it used in the traditional way and kind of see him helping someone build their saber. But what really works for the scene is that it has that nostalgia play, but it also has like a emotional through line that I think really works, right? Because Huyang asks Ezra who taught him how to build a lightsaber, and Sabine pops in to name drop Kanan Jarrus, who Huyang calls Caleb, which is, of course, Caleb is his given name, the Caleb Doom. Yeah, Doom.
So cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, I kind of like that because it's a funny thing where if you haven't watched it, if you haven't watched Rebels, you wouldn't know that. So I wonder if people were confused why Hu Yang called him a different name, or if they noticed that. But
I mean, it's one of those things where someone might be like, "Hey, did he call him a different name? Why would he do that?" And that's a
yeah,
chance to engage with the wider canon.
that's true. Then they have to go to Google. Yeah.
And to be fair, that whole Kanan Caleb thing is confusing even for those who are.
They're very similar. Most people probably wouldn't even notice, but
yeah, exactly. But again, coming back to that through line, that emotional through line, Ezra kind of like he gets kind of like paused here. He's like in this big rush, and then at the mention of Kanan, he stops and he asks Hu Yang how he knew Kanan, and Hu Yang is like, if you were listening, you would have heard when I said that I've been training, younglings how to build sabers for forever. And of course, I knew a young Caleb, right? He says he was a clever boy, Caleb was.
Yeah.
Very curious. A little shy, perhaps, but who can blame him? Those were troubling times. And then I just immediately imagined a little animated Caleb on the T6 coming back from the gathering being the ceremony that the Jedi go through to get their kyber crystal, and having to try to like figure out how to build a lightsaber for the first time, and it's just really cute to think about, right? Because we got to see what a young Caleb looked like. I mean, he was still relatively older at the time of Order 66, but he would have been 13-ish, probably when he was making his first saber. It's really so again. Just imagining a young 13-year-old Caleb is pretty cute. Maybe younger, maybe 11. I don't know. Anyway, he says he asks him how he's old enough to have known him. Again, if he was listening, he would already know the answer to that. But Hu Yang takes an opportunity to respond with a micro lesson, which is he's old enough to know that the relationship between master and apprentice is as challenging as it is meaningful. Which the camera then lingers on Sabine's face, where she kind of she's like, "Oh, I think he was talking to me too."
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And
absolutely.
I think it's brilliant. Brilliant's maybe a strong term. I think it's very solid, smart screenwriting when you can write a single line of dialogue that applies to everybody in the scene, right? So it applies to Ezra and to Sabine, and they both interpret it in their own ways. In the case of the show, it was more interested in what Sabine was feeling, but it also, again, it's this through line and something that the show's been talking about since the beginning, which is this connection between master and apprentice, and what that bond actually means, and what the outcomes of those relationships are. And they touch on it in the scene through the lens of the lightsaber and Hu Yang provides Ezra with a blade emitter that he was looking for. It apparently was a replacement part that he was holding on to for Kanan, but gave it to Ezra now as he felt it was an appropriate time, right? Because he's building a lightsaber in the same way that his master built one, and he gives him a part that his master had because, again, those through lines are so strong between master and apprentice. So we get to see the physical and the emotional through lines of that, and I think it's really, I think it's great. So it continues that heritage of the master and apprentice concept even further, and kind of grounds it in a physical form. What did you think of this whole exchange?
No, I liked it. I thought it was it's just very sweet because you see like Ezra's kind of, like you said, he's rushing around trying to find something, this specific part that Hu Yang has all along, right? And if he would have just taken the extra second to listen to him. But yeah, it's nice that he slows down when he hears Kanan's name, his old master's name, and and it's very sweet that Hu Yang pulls that part out for him and gives it to him, and it's just it's the exact right one that he needed. But what I'm curious about,
tell me more.
Where'd they get the crystal from? Does he just have like a secret little drawer of them? Which he might on that ship.
I mean, honestly, I wouldn't put it past Hu Yang to just have a couple of extras.
All the other parts, like, and I mean, like, I don't get why you wouldn't have extra kyber crystals in case something happens to yours. Like, it's a
good question. It's possible that he maybe had already found one on the planet before and was saving it.
Because it's different than his first one. His first lightsaber was blue, and now it's green.
No, his first one was green.
Sorry,
now it's
that's
blue.
What I meant to say.
Yes. And I think that, by the way, love the blue. I love that when you can bring in, you know, in the long history of lightsabers and the multiple lightsabers per owner, it's interesting how Star Wars seems to find a way to give one Jedi multiple colored lightsabers. So in the case of Anakin, it's blue and then red, obviously.
Of course, yeah.
But in the case of Luke, it's Anakin's saber that's just blue, and then he crafts his own and it's green.
Yeah.
Right. And we see this time and again, with when in the case of Rey, it's similar. Where again, in the case it's kind of like inheriting someone's old lightsaber. In the case, again, that's also Anakin's, but blue, right. And then she forges her own, and it's yellow.
Yeah.
So you get like I have no qualms with the idea that a Jedi could then connect with a different colored crystal.
Oh yeah, of course.
Over
that
time,
bug me at all.
Yeah.
Because I mean, Ahsoka's had so many different colored lightsabers.
Now. Oh yeah, she's had green, blue, and white at this point,
and
right?
yellow, because she had a green and a yellow one at one point.
Really? When?
When she's young, one's green and one's yellow.
Really? I thought they were both green.
No.
Oh, okay. Well,
one's
shows what
green
I know.
And one's kind of more of like a yellow color.
A mauve? No, mauve is not that
mauve
color. What color is mauve? Oh, mauve is. So that's okay. Okay. Yeah, I don't. I wanted to use the word mauve. All right. Anyway. We'll unlikely see a mauve-colored lightsaber anytime soon. At least until Samuel Jackson gives up the copyright on the purple lightsabers.
Wait, does he have a copyright on the purple?
No,
lightsabers?
I don't think so. But I think largely speaking, I think they would probably ask him if they were going to create another purple lightsaber. They'd probably go to him and say, "Is it cool if we give this new character a purple lightsaber?" And he might say no. So and I bet you they'd honor that.
Yeah, fair enough.
Anyway, Ezra finishes his saber. He ignites it. Really cool saber, by the way. I really like the design of it. I think it's got it's very much in line with like the lightsabers designs that you can build in Jedi Fallen Order and that kind of stuff. And Sabine looks on. She looks conflicted, but as Ezra looks back, she's already gone. What do you think she's thinking about here? I mean, right after she looks at him as he lights that lightsaber, and Huyang says, "Oh, you must have been a good student." And then Sabine looks conflicted. Is she just feeling guilty for not being a good student, or what do you think's going through her mind here?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Maybe it's a bit of that and a little bit of her just because she got to kind of see Ezra being a student too. So I think maybe it's a bit of her reflecting on her own Padawan adventure, kind of with Ahsoka, but like also maybe just a little bit of sadness thinking about Kanan and outcome too.
That's fair. I think that there's lots of things that she could be thinking about. I think for me, the interesting thing here is that obviously she goes to talk with Ahsoka next, and then these two scenes back to back are the most emotionally charged, I think, if you don't include the final scene. And she's thinking about how Ezra learned from Kanan these lessons, and that they became ingrained in him to the point where he could take this thing, create his own new lightsaber and become his own Jedi, knight, basically. We don't not yet grant him the rank of master. And she's kind of thinking about her training and how it's not going the way she wants, and thinking about how she may never get to experience that independence, the self-confidence that Ezra is able to feel through his connection not only to the Force but to his heritage through Kanan, right? Yeah. So it's interesting. I think it's a good emotional through line. So Ezra then turns back to Huyang to ask him about what happened between Ahsoka and Sabine, and I was like, I thought we already knew, because I thought we kind of did already know, but we guess we didn't, because we get a very interesting answer. Yeah. Ahsoka apparently became afraid that Sabine was training as a Jedi for the wrong reasons after what happened on Mandalore. He references the Night of a Thousand Tears and the Empire destroying or killing thousands, hundreds of thousands of Mandalorians, and that Sabine's family were among those who were killed. Huyang continues saying that, quote, at the time, Ahsoka felt that if Sabine unlocked her potential, she would become dangerous. I think important to note here is that Ahsoka uses the term "if," right? So when talking in confidence with Hu Yang. She's not saying that she will unlock her
No,
potential,
of
but
course
it's still a question mark to her. I think obviously they're conveying a conversation from before her World Between Worlds therapy.
Yes.
So she's having to feel she's feeling more insecure in her own abilities as a master, but also seeing these similarities between her and Anakin, between Sabine and Anakin, herself and Anakin, between again just the other fallen Jedi and kind of how they came or fell down that path, and it kind of starting with wanting to be a Jedi for the wrong reasons, and I find this is one of the most interesting like side bits. I feel like they don't really spend a lot of time on it. I hope they explore it more, but it's like, does learning this information, now it's out there, right? Hu Yang has it, Ezra has it, Ahsoka has this information. Sabine doesn't have this information. She doesn't know that that's what Ahsoka was thinking. So there's the potential for a couple things. There's the potential for her concerns to become real, right? In the sense that her worries were valid, that she was training for the wrong reasons, that she did want to avenge her family and avenge Mandalore and wanted the power of the Jedi to do that, right? And that given the opportunity, she will abandon the lessons of balance in favor of revenge and power, right? A path to the dark side, right?
Exactly, yeah.
And again, I think it's important to note Ahsoka's helmet in the opening blue, red, flashy Star Wars opening is red.
Oh, Sabine's helmet, you mean? Yeah.
Yeah. So what did I say?
You said Ahsoka's helmet.
Oh, yeah, sorry. Sabine's helmet. Yes. Yeah. Thank you. So it just gives so much more color to that thing anyway. But the other thing is this could be one of those fulfilling prophecies where when Sabine learns that Ahsoka had this worry about her, that she then pulls away from Ahsoka and her teachings and starts down that path that she might not have previously wanted to go down before, but now has been in a way pushed that way because of the fear that Ahsoka had about that. So there's this balance of fear, not just on Sabine's side, right? And obviously we know that fear leads to suffering.
Yes.
Fear leads to hate leads to suffering, etc. Eventually down the line to the dark side, as we all know. But that the fear of not wanting to train her, not committing, could also potentially put her down that same path. It's really interesting. I really liked it. What do you make of this revelation? Because I do think it's a revelation.
Oh, for sure. Because like we were kind of thinking that it had something to do with like Ahsoka didn't want to train her because she had too many attachments or something. Is kind of what we were figuring.
Right.
That it had.
Well, she said that before with Grogu.
Yeah, exactly. It was like exactly the same thing with Grogu there. So, yeah, it's interesting that we that was correct, right? So it's but getting the details of her being afraid, and like Ahsoka's still thinking about what happened to Anakin too, and that still weighs on her. And I think she's just exactly like too scared of that happening again because she's seen it in its worst capacity before. Sorry, excuse me.
Yeah,
and I can see her worry because of course being not in that Jedi realm yet of being at peace with things, like of course she's going to be scared that Sabine will just if she unlocks these powers within herself that she's going to go nuts and kill everyone, right? I can see her fear.
It's really interesting. I think it creates a really interesting dynamic for Sabine as a character that wasn't really there before, and now it's like, okay, what is she gonna crack? Like, what does that mean? And I do feel like even at the end of this episode that she's still holding something back. She's still not being entirely honest with herself or with Ahsoka. So, I think that's a really interesting. Yes, it's kind of like we've been down this road before, but because it's Ahsoka who's involved in this now master apprentice situation as the master, her perspective on the history of it brings a whole new perspective to the engagement, to their relationship. So yeah, I don't know. I just think it's really interesting. I'm really glad that was like, I just did not expect to get. I thought we already had enough information,
right?
And
Yes,
I was fine with that kind of like assumptions that we were making about the reasons why she was reluctant to train her. I mean, okay, well, she's not particularly strong with the Force, but she wants to try something new the Jedi weren't doing. Okay, that's a good reason. But she has too many attachments. She repeated that again with Grogu's. It makes sense, right? And they were butting heads. They weren't seeing eye to eye, and it speaks to what Hu Yang says before, which is that the relationship between master and apprentice is as challenging as meaningful. Which in sense means that the more challenging it is, the more meaningful it is.
Yes,
right?
Yeah.
And it just great. We know how challenging it was with Anakin and Ahsoka. Now we see it playing out again. Again, this heritage, this through line of master and apprentice throughout the ages is so fascinating, right? Because now she's a part of the same legacy as Yoda and Dooku and all these other characters that are so ingrained in Star Wars. So really cool. No notes. Just great stuff there. All right, so now we cut to the next great scene, which is Ahsoka heading out onto the wing of the T6. Sabine walking out onto the wing of the T6. Ahsoka is meditating on the roof. Ahsoka confronts the elephant in the room, really, congratulating her on her quote-unquote gamble paying off, referencing her kind of decision not to destroy the map, right?
Right.
Sabine feels guilty, but Ahsoka says she's not mad, that she understands why she decided to make the decision to, again, not destroy the map and to go along with Baylan and Thrawn. And she goes on to explain that when she was a Padawan, or over the years, that she too had to make difficult choices. Choices that many disagreed with or people didn't understand, but that Anakin always had her back no matter what. And her line that he always stood by me, even when no one else would. Right. And the look on her face is just like of this like true, not joy isn't the right word, but just like she's having her own nostalgia trip, right? She's thinking about the good times, about about how he was loyal to her, right? Even though he had his own problems but that loyalty to her and his commitment to keeping her safe ultimately brought her to where she was today, even despite his faults, right? Which she's come to terms with, largely given her therapy session. Always helpful to have a therapy session with the kind of aspect of your trauma in ghost form.
Yes.
And so she vows to always be there for Sabine in the same way Anakin was there for her. And again, I got a little emotional here as she's explaining her position about how she's talking about how her life, and my mind flashes back to her walking away from the Jedi Order, from having to deal with the accusation of her bombing, and how Anakin largely took her side in that situation, and all that kind of stuff, and how even after she left and then asked for help for Mandalore, how he came to her rescue, gave her half of his troops, all those things, and never mind all the other countless times he saved her and like
of course,
vice versa. But those kind of big moments really come to mind there and really help flavor it for the folks that have been there all along.
Exactly,
and as an aside, I do find that people reminiscing about people they loved always gets to me, right? It's like, oh, my grandpa, he was such a sweet man. He used to walk me to school every day. And like, it could be just the simplest little stories, but and again, knowing that we always kind of treat the dead with a little bit more respect than we do the living, for right or wrong, for those people who may be dead who are terrible, the Hitlers of the world, for instance, right? We don't really give them benefit of the doubt, even though they're dead, right? But largely speaking, most people get the benefit of the doubt once they're dead because we remember them for their positive attributes, largely speaking, and not their negative ones. And that focus on the positive attributes, the impact they had on someone's life and how it's shaped them and informed their opinions on what it means to be a good person to other people and all that kind of stuff, I feel like that really always works for me. So I really liked it. What do you make of this whole bit where she kind of comes to terms with Sabine?
It's just like, I don't know. I think you kind of nailed it. It's just so sweet, and I love these moments where we kind of get to, as fans, reflect on past moments of like Anakin and Ahsoka, because I do feel like that's kind of like a through theme in this whole series.
100%.
Is all about, it's not all about, but it's just kind of underlying there in almost every episode. So
I think he gets a name drop or is literally in the episode basically every episode since he appears. So
pretty much,
when he appears in the World Between Worlds episode 5, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a reference to him before that, but after that he either appears again in hollow form, or his name is mentioned once, if not twice, an episode going forward, and the legacy of that. And by the way, by multiple people, right? Hera brings him up. Thrawn brings him up. Like the legacy of Anakin is one of I wouldn't say just well known, but it's like it carries a lot of weight, amongst these people.
But yeah, I just like any moment that we kind of get like that to sort of reflect with a character.
I agree. Ahsoka asks Sabine if Sabine has kept up with her training. She says, "I try," and then laughs and says, "I do," which implies that they've had the "I do," the
right, yes,
do or do not.
Do or do not.
There is no try lesson at some point already in their training, which is very cute. Any version of the try versus do sentiment or lesson, because we've seen different versions of it now over the years. Always works because it's like you don't have to say the exact like phraseology that Yoda does to immediately understand what they're talking about and what they're referencing, which is like what makes it such a brilliant, like, long-standing lesson. I actually do have my own gripes with that lesson in and of itself. I think the idea that you should never try, you can only ever do, I feel like is a little confusing, and also it kind of like deters people from. It seemingly deters people from making attempts at things that they might feel is outside of their capabilities.
Right.
And like, I don't know if that's a great lesson. I know the Jedi have good lessons. They're not always like, the best lessons.
Yeah.
Right?
Well, they touch on that a little bit in Rebels, because Kanan tries to say that to Ezra, and Ezra's like, "What do you mean? Like, how can I do something without trying first?" And Kanan's like, "Yeah, I don't know. I never understood that one either."
So that's funny. Yeah, that's good. And also, like, again, Sabine's kind of like a little chuckle. She's like catches herself, which is fun.
Yeah.
She also says she's gained more control over her saber. I laughed during this moment because as soon as she said that, I was like, there's more to being a Jedi than having a lightsaber. And then the next thing Ahsoka says is, she's like, can I let you in on a secret? There's more to being a Jedi than wielding a lightsaber. Right. Which, by the way, was a lesson that you feel like she might have learned with Ezra literally last week when he refused to take his old lightsaber from her, right? She says, this is a truly great Jedi lesson, which is train your mind, train your body, trust in the Force, right? Mm-hmm. Be prepared, do all the things that you can do as a person, right? Be physically fit, be mentally strong, but ultimately the Force acts in mysterious ways, right?
Yes.
And to truly be a Jedi, you can't direct the Force. The Force directs you, right?
Yeah.
So it's, again, brilliant lesson, and I think comes paired well with this kind of like, it's more than being a swordsman, essentially, right? So again, some great stuff there. Really like the connections to the Jedi teachings of yore, and how they kind of, the new ones, how they fit with the old ones, and all that kind of stuff. Again, no notes, great stuff. And again, a strong emotional through line because it has those connections to heritage and to people that we know are dead. Just then, though, as Ezra pops out the door to say something, 2 TIE fighters, the ones that we saw from before, come in from the distance and start a strafing run and lay some, basically a free shot on the T6. before I guess we get into the sort of the action really starts picking up at this point. Any final thoughts on these master apprentice relationship concepts?
No, I don't think so. I like when we get to have these discussions about it. Like I just like when it gets brought up because they're just fun relationships to dissect. And it's just
because
neat when we get to have so many different versions of them, right? So
they're unique to, not unique to Star Wars. Obviously, masters and apprentices are not unique. I mean, you can be an apprentice tradesperson, right? Yeah. Plumber or whatever. But something tells me, and then now I've never been an apprentice in an official capacity, right? For anything. But I have to imagine the relationship between a Jedi master and apprentice is different than a carpenter master and apprentice. Yeah. So, what's fun about this dynamic, which has been now a through line since, Obi-Wan and Luke in A New Hope, and Anakin and Obi-Wan, and it goes on and on and on, either from a timeline perspective or from a chronological perspective of the movie releases. We've had this concept in Star Wars now for so long, and it is unique to some degree to Star Wars, and it's in the way that they treat it with this heritage and these connections and through lines that trickle down from master to apprentice to apprentice to apprentice. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Is in both on the light and dark side is fascinating. And it allows you to kind of explore these genealogies and these kind of like personality traits through this kind of unique lens that you don't really get to do in other franchises, right? Like, Star Trek doesn't have an analog to that, not really. If you have Captain and first mate, right?
It's just not quite the same.
Not the same, So, and you have mentee relationships, but again, it's not this like prescribed traditional, and I think part of it is that like it's baked into tradition. Like there's this sense of like, to be a master and apprentice, there is a way to do it that feels like you are a part of something greater. And I don't know, it's just very satisfying. So yeah, I agree. It's fun when we get to have those conversations.
Yeah.
Okay, so the TIEs attack. The heroes on the wing are not hurt, but the ship loses its stabilizers. Ahsoka and Ezra jump down to the ground to use the Force to keep the ship in the air, mostly so it doesn't smush the toady. And meanwhile, inside, Sabine and Huyang quickly work the controls to kind of muster a counterattack. Sabine makes some type of adjustment to the engines, and Huyang warns her that it will only give her the engines a short burst of power, and she responds with, "More than I need." She basically waits for the TIE fighters to like get into range. She punches the engine and uses the wings of the T6 itself to take out the two TIEs as like a blunt instrument. I love, by the way, the TIE fighter, like the pilot, like covering his eyes right before he crashes into the ship. Very fun. The T6 then crashes triumphantly down onto the ground over the ridge in the distance. But hey, they say any landing you can walk away from is a good landing.
Yeah, which is like wild. Like I don't know how there wasn't more damage to the T6 in this, but
yeah, it basically just like smushes right into the ground. But maybe they managed to find a way to
from that and from it like flying up and like taking out two.
Yeah, it seems like they kind of like clip their wings, which is enough to like take them out, I guess, but and without doing a lot of damage. I love seeing the toady cheer here. Very Ewok-esque. They really fill that Ewok role here.
Yes, they do.
And like more so every week, it felt like they were filling that role. Anyway, Ezra is worried that they're gonna like. This is when the kind of like the pace of the episode really picks up, because he's like, this is really gonna slow it. Like, not to be a downer here, but we're kind of on a schedule, and this is really gonna slow us down. And but again, keeping with kind of this new and improved Ahsoka, her optimism is not even a little bit affected. She's ready to go. She's like, well, that's fine. We'll just take it. We'll go another way. So back at the castle, Enoch reports to Thrawn that the TIEs engaged the T6 and made a successful strike, but they lost contact with the pilots. Thrawn feels like this is, quote-unquote, an acceptable outcome, and tells Enoch to mark the TIEs as lost and to mark their captain for citation. So I love how he's kind of like always thinking about the rules and regulations.
Always.
Right?
That's
So
just his character. Yeah.
right.
It's
So
just
hey,
so
like
funny.
let's make sure we're accounting for our missing ships, but also let's make sure to speak with their captain and make some accommodations. So a citation in a military sense is a formal honorary mention by high authority of a military unit specific and outstanding performance, notably in battle, right?
Which is also funny because it's like, okay, so you're making the citation to what? Like the Empire doesn't exist anymore.
I guess the idea, like to him, it still does, right? And he really drives that home in this episode. He keeps saying that it's not about him; it's about it's about the Empire. And he's basically saying, like, in a grander scheme of an army, these soldiers, performed well in combat against a superior opponent and deserve to be, their families deserve to get a Purple Heart in the mail or whatever. How that works. Again, apologies for those who have a military background. I don't fully understand that, but how the process there works. But again, it's like a good nod to, hey, not only the reason that Thrawn commands so much respect is because he respects his soldiers also.
Yes, yeah.
He doesn't treat them as cannon fodder necessarily. He does at times, but even in those cases, he knows what he's putting them in. He often gives them advanced warning that that's what is going to happen, and then at least honors them in death in some form or fashion. So Thrawn then turns his attention to what is next. I love how he's like he doesn't have time to lollygag. He assumes that their ship is probably downed and that the Jedi will certainly try attack from the ground, and he has them prepare for that attack immediately. Like, let's not waste any time. We need to prepare for whatever the next thing is, right?
Yeah.
We quickly cut back to the heroes. Huyang and the Toady are starting to fix the ship while the Jedi take their howlers to the castle on foot. We get a nice "May the Force be with you" from Huyang, and we see the Toady kind of being this combination of Ewoks and what are the little sand guys called again? The sandcrawler people, Jawas, and those little short people that from Episode 9, and I guess from Mandalorian now, who fix droids. I can't remember the name of those creatures either, but those guys.
Yes, yeah. Babu Frick,
the Babu Fricks of the world. Yeah. They're kind of like a combination of all those.
Yeah, starts with an A. They're like N.
I don't. I there's just no way I'm ever gonna remember every species in this galaxy. There's just too many. I guess maybe in this example, there's only 2 new species on this specific galaxy, but we don't know what the other one's called yet. So, and they might not be anything special. And again, we get that nice "May the Force be with you" from Huyang. Back at the castle, Morgan is giving a speech to a squad of night troopers. "The blessing of the Great Mothers will protect you in battle against the Jedi. Go now, let none pass." Obviously, again, I feel like an allusion to Lord of the Rings. "You shall not pass" is obviously a pretty well-known line from those movies.
Of course, yes.
And pretty cool one. So similar in that vein. Thrawn, though, this is curious. Thrawn asks if they are all the quote-unquote volunteers and if they were all made aware, which she confirms both questions affirmatively, basically saying, yeah, they all came out to honor you and make a sacrifice for you, and they're well aware of the dangers. Thrawn rebuffs the compliment, though, basically saying that the sacrifice will be for, quote-unquote, for the Empire and the security of our galaxy. Again, really driving home that he is the quote-unquote heir to the Empire.
Yeah,
right?
I guess so.
Yeah. And then Morgan bows. And again, she has her own... We hear later that she has her own motivations, obviously. But interesting perspective. I guess this isn't explained at the time, but I guess the presumption is this. He made a call to his troopers saying, listen, there's Jedi coming. You're almost certainly not going to survive. But we need you to hold the fort. But don't worry, even if you die, we're going to have the Night Sisters bring you back to life.
Yes, yeah.
Though you might be something entirely different.
Yeah. Hold the line so we can get away. but
exactly.
we're gonna give you some spooky abilities.
Exactly. And it's wild how many of them volunteered. Again, another sign of how committed they are to the cause, right?
Exactly. That is kind of like, again, it's kind of Thrawn's whole shtick, right? Like even in the books, like a lot of the other like chiss and stuff that he works with, like they end up doing a lot for him and going out of their way to do a lot for him because they like being under his command.
They
like
respect.
A lot of them do.
Yeah, again, it's all about respect, right?
So there are a lot. I mean, there's a lot of them that hate him too, but you know,
that's a different thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Outside, the Jedi make visual contact with the castle. We get to see the Eye of Sion and the Chimera, Thrawn's ISD, kind of like docking over top of this castle. It's a very cool shot. There's no denying it's like very awesome to look at.
Super cool.
Ahsoka quickly checks in with Huyang, who doesn't have much good news at this point. It's a little early, and tells them to, quote, not wait for him. And you also get a shot of a toady electrocuting himself, which is really cute and funny. Classic Star Wars stuff.
Yes, you always see the little comedic.
Again, that's the Babu Frick moment, basically.
Yes, yeah.
Ahsoka then asks Ezra what they should expect since he's been there with with Thrawn and them for so long, but he doesn't really have much to offer here. He says Thrawn apparently found the castle and awoke the witches. He was then not able to come back here alone. It was too dangerous.
Yes.
A little vague.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of makes sense because he's like, all right, like Thrawn kind of was able to establish himself a lot quicker and make himself a lot stronger.
Well, he does have a lot more resources than just a single person.
Yeah, because he's got all the troopers and everything too. So Ezra's like, crap, I guess I got to go hide with the toadies because, yeah.
Well, and I think it's clear that like the witches were the ones that helped him repair his ship because that's where that gold comes from.
Yeah.
Right. Anyway, it's how fortunate for him that he stumbled, because if that wasn't there, then there'd be no way home.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Anyway, they decide that based on this lack of information from Ezra, they're just going to try the front door. That's the big classic Jedi plan, which is not much of a plan.
Yes.
To be honest.
Just storm straight through.
Yeah. Inside, Thrawn is informed of the approaching Jedi, and he has his ships open fire on them. He says, "Open hellfire on them."
Yeah, rain hellfire.
Which is really fun.
It's so cool because we don't get to see it as often. Like we've seen it with Thrawn's ship before in Rebels, but we don't get to see these big, what do you call
capital
them?
ships?
Capital ships shoot from below very often, like with their gunships on the bottom. I don't know.
We saw it in Rebels, but not in live action very often.
Not in live action, yeah. But I just feel like we always see space battles from like above or the side or whatever, but we don't get to see that they can actually shoot down onto planets and onto cities, and like they're a lot more dangerous than just being a big ship in the sky, right?
One would argue that those turbo lasers are more dangerous in that format, like used as a bombardment tool than they even are against other ships, because they're clunky and slow, and really work well against kind of stationary objects.
Yeah, well, that's exactly what Thrawn was trying to do, like because he does it to their base when they have that creepy base with the spiders.
Yes,
in Rebels, and then he tries to do it to Lothal as well. So yeah, it's like we do get to see this happen every once in a while with him, but it was very cool.
I hated that spider base, by the way, in Rebels. I thought it was so boring visually, like these big mushroom plants, brown, gray planet, and like having to deal with these stupid spiders all the time was like annoying. And again, I know they served a purpose, and I know that Bendu was there, but still, I thought that venue was almost as boring as their rendition of Mandalore in Rebels, which was just a white background. So, yeah. I will never not bring up a chance to just totally eviscerate their decision to not really use any visual styling for Mandalore at all in Rebels. So I just find it like so unforgivable. It's so wild to me. But anyway, whatever. I love how obviously they're not going to get blown up by these these turbo lasers. They have the ability of foresight to avoid getting hit by those, and they're too slow to hit the fast moving targets. But I love such a badass line from Thrawn here when he's like, "There will be no negotiating with the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker."
I know, I liked that too. It's like he just knows. Like
it's so badass. It's both badass in the sense that like the way he says it and how he says it and when he says it, but also the implication of that Anakin was badass and he didn't negotiate.
Yes, exactly.
And also that, the implication of what that means for Ahsoka and how he sees her. It's just like, there's a lot of layers to it, and it's all badass, in my opinion.
It's great. It's just like he knows, because he's not even doing the bad guy thing where he talks too much about, like, to the people around him. Like, he's not doing, I always forget the word. But when you feel like you have to tell the audience why all the time, right?
Oh, exposition.
Exposition, yeah. But I like that he's just saying there will be no negotiating with the apprentice of Anakin Skywalker. It's like, that's just enough to say that.
Yeah, that's
like, I love it.
That's why he's trying to kill them at all costs.
Dangerous enough, yeah.
Because he might have tried to buy time by negotiating, but he doesn't feel like that would have been an appropriate strategy here. The Jedi race across the fields under fire, but are unharmed as they successfully use the Force to open the front door. To the displeasure of Thrawn. I love the look on his face when they break through the front door. He's like, ugh. Of course they did. And then he then turns back to his ship and informs the Great Mothers that it's, quote, time. And I guess it's time to presumably resurrect a bunch of troopers.
Yes.
Now, inside, the Jedi are faced with a squadron of troopers and in unison deflect their blaster fire. This is where I felt like, and I mentioned this at the top, where I feel like things look a little bit silly in live action. It just doesn't work quite as well in live action as it does in animation, I think, maybe. Kind of this classic Jedi defend the blasters where you have someone with a blaster. It's like the Anakin, Ahsoka, Rex maneuver, basically.
Right, yes.
And by the way, it's like we kind of have this like really cool direct, speaking of through lines, right? Ahsoka having learned that from Anakin with Rex, you have the clones being a clone of Mandalorian, so you have that like visual connection to Ahsoka's helmet and her using the blasters, and then of course there being another Padawan here using a lightsaber with not really a Padawan. I guess Ezra's kind of graduated, but the two Jedi together. So it's like it's a cool visual callback, but maybe not as strong visually as it might have been in concept. I don't know. I have to watch it a little bit more in how I feel. I did think it was really badass and cool when I was watching it the first time, but the second time it was like there's some really cool like kills, like where Ezra like pushes two of them, and then Ahsoka like slices through both of them, and again like some of that stuff is really cool. But like just the standing there watching them deflect blaster bolts, it's like kind of it's a little silly looking. That's my opinion. So they successfully defeat the squad, unsurprisingly, but they don't have much time to celebrate as we see the Great Mothers casting some type of spell to resurrect the troopers with some cool green smoke. Their eyes light up green underneath their helmets, which is cool. And then I like how they're just kind of like, I don't know what they're doing. I don't know why they felt this was necessary. They're just kind of like standing there, looking the opposite way, thinking. They're like, now what? Instead of just continuing up the stairs or whatever they're supposed to do.
Coming online in their brains, yeah.
Yeah, no, I just mean like the Jedi.
Oh, the Jedi.
They're like, they're not looking backwards. They're all just standing, staring at a wall, basically.
Because, effect.
Yeah, they need to make it dramatic. So the Jedi notice, and as they start waking up, and it's a surprise to everyone, which I like. It's like, they're just like, I don't know, this is news to me. So they have to handle that. They have to deal with that. I guess Ahsoka doesn't have much experience with the witches of Dathomir.
Yeah, not as much. No.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. I can't think off the top of my head, but yeah.
I don't know. I can't think of a time where she was like, no, it's. I don't feel like she had a lot of those connections there, but and maybe that's why she doesn't have experience here. But I probably explain it. If we'd watched the Screen Crush recap, we wouldn't know the answer to that.
Yeah.
This is when we get a cool and confident lightsaber move from Sabine to. I've skipped ahead too far. They are forced to basically run up the stairs. Always fun to see. Classic fantasy storytelling often has a sword fight. Think of the Princess Bride. Think of it's in a million fantasy movies where they're like fighting up a set of stairs, especially a spiral staircase, right? So we get some of that here. And so they're forced up this spiral staircase and are ambushed from the side about halfway up. We don't know how far up, but at some distance up. They're able to successfully close some blast doors. Thankfully, they're at every intersection, so that's helpful. And that helps them keep them at bay at a time, though they keep blasting through the doors and continue to approach. This is when we get this really cool moment. This is what I was talking about before. This really cool, confident lightsaber move for Sabine to rescue Ezra, because she's like, he's like being held by one of these troopers, and she pulls a blaster, and he's like, no, I don't I don't know if you're gonna, and then she's like, okay, never mind. So she pulls out her saber and like stabs him through the head or whatever she does. And it's like really cool. And he's like, oh, that's like really cool. And she's like, well, she's been training.
Yeah.
she says to Ezra, what's your excuse?
Yeah.
Which I think is and then he says, I missed you, which is a nice touching moment.
Very cute. Yes.
Be clear though, he did miss her like a sister.
Yes.
Though. Okay. Just
like
don't anyone get any ideas.
Yeah. No shipping.
Okay.
Here.
Yeah. No shipping here.
Yeah, I liked. I really liked the zombie stormtrooper thing. I thought it was cool.
I like that they're all wearing armor, so it's really easy to not. You don't have to like do a bunch of fun special effects. No. It's like, okay, no, just some green lights.
Like, so you can hear like their bones cracking when they get reanimated, and I don't know. I felt even like the music it had some violin in the background that sounded really old school horror movie to me too. Again, I just like these kind of creepy, exactly, like old school horror tropes that are just kind of getting thrown in a little bit here that are just really neat.
Yeah, it's like classic zombie fare, right? Like you can slow them down, but you can't stop them.
Yeah,
kind of things. You know,
zombie stormtroopers, pretty cool. Like I like that a lot.
And actually, the zombie stormtroopers get even cooler later. Yes. So yeah. Anyway, outside in the Chimera, the Eye of Sion complete their docking, and Morgan reports that they are ready to leave. Thrawn is worried that the Jedi are about to make it aboard. He says that they're making progress faster than he anticipated, and asks Morgan for more time. She considers it, saying she understands his implication and that she'll need to basically personally stay behind to stall them. He says for the Empire, but she bows, and under her breath she says for Dathomir.
I like that.
Which is cool. I feel like we should have been maybe touching on that kind of like dueling allegiances concept a little bit more throughout the season.
I just feel like it gives her more depth as a character. Like she's not just
a lackey.
Yeah, like she's not just like fully about the Empire. Like it's like she's kind of got these other little motivations for her too, and especially now that they've done this whole witchy, imbued her with that magic, right? It's like even more she's willing to sacrifice herself so that they can get back to Dathomir with all their creepy boxes, which probably have Night Sister corpses in them.
Probably.
Yeah.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
I just liked how he basically asks her to stay behind without saying it specifically.
Right, yeah.
Right? It's like this implication, like, listen, we need more time. Ahem.
Yeah. So,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So what are you going to do about that?
Yeah, exactly.
And he also, like, it's nice to see that he understands, like, how problematic it would be if the Jedi got aboard the ship, right?
Well,
he's like, once they get on board, it's like, man, we're screwed.
Yeah.
Right? So we really need to prevent that from happening. So she understands. She does what she has to do. But we also get our first look at the Death Troopers that are on board. Important to remember, when they were taken, Thrawn had 2 Death Troopers with him that were like his personal escort. We get to see them here in their kind of like refurbished armor, with like the repairs and stuff on it. They look really badass. So kudos to the costume design here. The Death Troopers always look really cool, but they look even cooler here. So back with the Jedi, they continue their way up the tower, but the undead troopers are on their heels. They continue to close blast doors to stall them until they reach some type of antechamber and are confronted by Morgan Elsbeth herself. Ahsoka has the other 2 go to stop Thrawn while she faces off herself. Sabine rightly says, we have to stick together. And I thought at this point for sure they hadn't learned their lesson, which meant that someone was going to die. I really thought that. I thought that's it. Like Ahsoka, this is how she was going to die. As the other 2 were bought time to get away. And like, yeah, I don't know. I thought there might have been something really dramatic happening here, but just like, it's weird. Like we really hammered on this idea that they got to stick together, and then they constantly keep splitting up, and it's very annoying.
Yeah.
So like it just it's like a confusing message, like do they need to stick together, or I guess not because they're fine on their own, Anyway, I thought for sure she'd die here. Because we were coming up close to the end of the episode. We didn't know what that fate. Nothing was going to happen.
Yeah, I mean, I understand where you're coming from with that, but I was hoping like, okay, like she can't die here. Like I was like in the opposite.
At the hands of Morgan Elsbeth. Yeah, it does seem a little
denial. I was like, there's no way. Well, not in denial, but I was just sitting there being like, this better not be how Ahsoka dies. Because
I think you're mostly right. Primarily speaking, her dying to Morgan in the season finale of her own show would probably not be that satisfying.
No.
And it doesn't really give Thrawn that victory that I felt like was needed, right? Like if Thrawn had killed somebody like by his own the direct action, or something that's not just like, hey, the next closest force wielding Sith-esque person, you go and kill her, and that would be the same. It just doesn't have the same impact. So I can see that. I was just kind of like in the mode of like, oh man, we're getting close to the end of this episode. No one's died yet. This is the season finale. What's the big moment? Is it going to be that she dies here because she makes the same mistake as before? But again, she already died this season, so that didn't make sense either. In retrospect, it's dumb. So anyway, Morgan then engages with Ahsoka in with the blade of Talzin in this kind of swift back and forth duel. Meanwhile, Ahsoka and Ezra face off against the Death Troopers at the top of the tower. So they're kind of ambushed by those same Death Troopers we saw earlier. And Ezra stabs one through the chest with his saber to no avail. To no effect.
Doesn't do anything.
Yeah. Which is right away got to be a bad sign,
Yeah.
Sabine, at this point, switches between blaster and saber. She hasn't kind of come to that, like, balance of both yet, which, by the way, later on when she's using both a saber and blaster, which is one of the saber stances that you could have in which Jedi is it? Not Fallen Order, the sequel to Fallen Order. Jedi Survivor. Yeah, you can have a blaster and a single bladed saber at the same time. It's pretty cool, and it's like very similar to this, where you just like you automatically just shoot the nearest people, so you don't have to like aim it.
Right.
And like when she does that like side thing where she like shoots one way and then like stabs another with her saber the other way, it's like shit. That's cool.
Yeah, it is.
There should be more. There should be more of that.
Yeah. It's like I said. I was like, I want Ezra to bring back his blaster saber.
He's not gonna. The Force is his ally now.
I know.
Anyway, they face off against these Death Troopers, and it's not going well. Basically, all three of our heroes are kind of on their heels early on in this fight. Thrawn then, at this point, receives word that they have their course locked in and has them take the ship out, this new combined transformer ship, so that they can make their jump to hyperspace. Cut back to the heroes. Ahsoka and Morgan continue their duel, and Ezra and Sabine continue to face off against the Death Troopers. All of our heroes are on their back foot, as I mentioned. We see under one of the Death Troopers' helmets that they're really just full-on walking zombies at this point, right?
I loved that. I didn't catch that the first time I watched it for whatever reason. But yeah, the second time I was like, oh, that's so cool. It's like an actual decaying dead guy under there. It was like very good effects.
Which is way more interesting than just a gas bag or whatever.
Yeah, gas bag. Yeah. I like it's just like never brought up again. It's like Marok or Merrick is just like,
Marok.
Yeah.
I don't know. They people call him by different names. The whole thing.
Yeah. It's like, no, he was just ghosty ghost.
I mean, he's just he's the most ghosty ghost that we could come up with. There's really. Yeah,
I just think it's Anyway, we talked about it before, but it's just so funny of everyone's theories, all the theories about who is he? It's Ezra. It's like shut up.
Oh man, well, the Ezra one was stupid.
You all feel dumb now, don't you?
No offense to those who thought it was Ezra, but that one just didn't make sense.
No,
Ezra was how is he back, but Thrawn not back then?
Yeah.
So anyway.
But yeah, no. But anyways, I liked these creepy. I don't know.
Oh yeah, these Death Troopers, like really bringing the death into Death Trooper,
Yeah, we were saying as we were watching, I'm like, Adam was like, oh yeah, I bet like whoever comes up with the Black Series toys were just like salivating seeing this episode with like all the new toys they can make.
Oh my god, I can't wait to get the cool new trooper. And so
like
I
a
mean, I already
zombie
have
death
I
trooper.
already have a Death Trooper, but now they're going to need to get a Night Trooper and a Night Death Trooper,
Yeah,
or a Night Undead Trooper, which I hope is what they're called.
yes, me too. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, they're really hard to kill, but because they're zombies, they also follow zombie rules,
Yes.
which means that you need to go for the head.
Yeah.
Sabine gets held by one of the troopers while Ezra gets thrown basically closer and closer to the edge. With hope kind of failing and getting choked out by this super strong Death Trooper, undead Death Trooper, she attempts to use the Force, which she's been failing at basically all series long, to pull the lightsaber to her. She's having her Wampa moment,
Yes,
right?
Of course.
From the ground, and she's ultimately able to pull the saber to her. I love that gets that we still get the little wiggle first. You always have to have a little wiggle, and then it comes.
100%. Yeah.
Right. The classic is important. It doesn't just
even
yeah.
A light, like, is it even a force pull if it doesn't do a little wiggle first?
I don't know. I don't think it is, especially if it's your first force pull.
Exactly.
It has to have a little wiggle. It's the law. She's ultimately able to pull the saber to her, igniting it through the head of the trooper holding her, right through the head. Well done. Now that she's free, she's able to distract the other trooper that was facing off against Ezra, who is then able to do his own force pull to grab his own saber, and then they do this really cool camera trick where he lunges and decapitates the Death Trooper, but just as the camera pans around one of those pillars that is up there. So we don't see it, but we do see his head fall to the ground.
Yes.
So pretty cool.
Yeah.
What did you make of this action sequence?
I like this action sequence. I thought it was really fun, and it just looked good. Even like Ahsoka fighting Morgan Elsbeth kind of in the basement there at the same time.
Yeah.
Kind of is good too. Like, I think a lot of their movements are, I was just really impressed with everything. I mean, even we were talking about like Ezra, and I do feel like he could have easily just like force pushed his zombie dude just off the edge, because
100%.
But I'm like,
I mean,
but I get it. They kind of need to make it a little more.
I mean, you say that, it's interesting though, because it's like we have in multiple points in this episode, we have Ahsoka telling Sabine that being a Jedi is more than wielding a lightsaber. We have Ezra last week saying that he doesn't need it, that the Force is his ally. And then this week, it's like, no, he has to build a lightsaber immediately, and then forgets that he can use the Force in other ways because he just does the classic moves along with the lightsaber. So
I would have loved to see him just do like a massive Force push and like just throw a guy off the.
I mean, like just like lift them up and throw them off the roof. It's like the easiest. I mean, again, not to write the show, there wouldn't be a cool action sequence if that wasn't the case. But
exactly. It's like you gotta. I get why they don't do that.
I will just say that I preferred the action sequences that were more personal, like between these, or at least in smaller scope. Right, these ones felt more dangerous, more exciting, higher stakes. But when they're just facing off like a bunch of faceless squadron of troopers, it doesn't have that same impact. So I felt like these ones were really effective, whereas the stuff maybe a little bit earlier was less so. And even, by the way, coming up later, even more so. So back with Ahsoka, she's now defending herself against the squad of troopers that have caught up with them. We get I will say, she backs up through the door. She does this like cool spinning move with her lightsaber to deflect like 3 or 4 blasts. That was pretty cool. Yeah. I'll give her that.
You'll give her that.
Yeah. And then meanwhile, with the Chimera slowly moving away from the tower, Ezra and Sabine debate the merits of whatever plan they can come up with, which is essentially to jump to the ship's hangar, which is still relatively close, but a massive jump even for a Jedi. It's I don't know, how far would you say that jump is? It's freaking really far away.
It's far. Like, I don't
like
know.
A football field diagonally.
Yeah, I would
like
say
100 yards away, probably.
At least.
I would, yeah. I'd say that's fair. Maybe further. Like once you get those shots of them from the hangar looking down, it looks so far away. Like
it looks like
you're the top of a building.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I was gonna say. It's like a whole building away. But I liked this though. Like, I know we're gonna get to it with the the Force push and everything though, because I think it's a little callback to Rebels, because Kanan and Ezra do this in Rebels.
And she's obviously seen them do that.
Yeah. I think it's just like, it's just so cute. Like, just watching them, not cute, but you know what I mean? Like, her being like, we can do
Cute's
this. Like,
fine.
I can do this. Like, like, I'm ready.
I mean, it is. If I'm Ezra at this moment, I'm like, listen, I know you feel very confident that you can do this, but also you only just kind of figure this out now.
Yeah.
And it's a much bigger. I feel like it would make more sense for her to jump and have Ezra pull her, like push her, than it did the other way around. You know?
Yeah.
Because again, her abilities are still kind of like nascent at this point, but trust in the Force, right?
Yeah.
So he believes in her, believes in the plan. It's the only chance they have right now, right? They don't have time to debate it. Every moment they passes, ship gets further away, right? So they jump into action, and he makes a leap of faith, literally, faith in that he won't die, and faith in her that she'll save him. And she gives the big push, and the Force theme plays triumphantly, and then we get this kind of like fun little bathos moment where he kind of a little bit undercuts the like exciting nature. I think if I was doing it, if you want to swell the music like that, I think it's more fun for him to make the jump and just take out the two, take out the two troopers right away. But instead they kind of undercut it a little bit. He lands a little bit short, and then has to pull the Obi-Wan leap from the pit move to take out the troopers. And then he even gets help from Sabine, which by the way, he gets the first one. The second one looks like it's about to get a shot in, but Sabine takes him out from down below. It's like kind of a fun moment. But again, I was doing it not to write the show. I would have just leaned into the triumphant nature of it instead of trying to undercut it a little bit. He then tells her to hurry up because he's like, we don't have time for this. Let's go. So she can join him up on she can join him up on the ship. But she spots Ahsoka defending herself against the troopers. The way that they cut it, though, it looks like she's about to like make the jump herself, but we don't see, and it cuts to Ahsoka's perspective first. And she's continuing the fight, and Morgan rejoins the fight herself, cutting through one of Ahsoka's saber hilts. So it's really weird. So she's fighting against these troopers who keep dying and then coming back to life immediately.
Right.
And then, but Morgan, when she gets involved, the troopers stop fighting.
I know, it's interesting. Hey,
it's kind of stupid.
They just like stand around in a circle just watching, and I was
like,
so to me, it's obviously there's many reasons for this, but I just wonder if it's maybe a bit out of a source of respect. Like it's almost a disrespectful way to fight when the two swordsmiths are fighting to like just go in and like shoot the target.
And she is kind of like more, she did swear to the old ways. Maybe this is a part of the old ways.
That's kind of what I was thinking. I was like, okay, well maybe there's just some kind of, but I did find it odd too. I'm like, that is funny that they're just like standing in a circle watching them fight.
Right, and it's like, I guess it's like she's already doing the job that she needs to, which is slow them down. She doesn't have to kill them. She wants to probably, but it's more about, at this point, like that direct one-on-one confrontation that she wants to have. Revenge maybe for having lost that original duel to her back in Mando Season 2. So, lots of cool stuff there. I love when they cut through that one. I don't love it because now she only has one saber. But hopefully, no, she probably doesn't recover the crystal from that hilt.
She might.
So
why not?
Well, that whole like tower collapses, so maybe she can sense it and find it through the rubble later.
Right. I
don't know
about that. Well, I don't know. She's got a cool witch sword now. Maybe
that's true. She doesn't need it.
One of those,
right?
Yeah,
she can just carry that around, and she's got her cool witch sword.
Yeah.
Hopefully, it's not like doesn't corrupt her or something like that. Whispering to her in her sleep or something. That's all. I feel like that trope is a little played out, in my opinion. Like the ring, it's like influencing her or something. Anyway, so the fight continues. So she's now down to one saber, and her squad, the squad of troopers at her back. Morgan gloats, saying that her friends must be dead and that she'll soon join them. Really doing that classic villain speech, really here.
Bad guy speech.
Yeah. And that she will die on this, forsaken planet in another galaxy alone, really driving home, that alone concept. And then we get Sabine emerging from wherever the heck she was hiding. I don't know where she was hiding. And says, "Not alone." Very cool.
Love it.
And she does that, like I mentioned, that really cool Saber blaster shot move at the same time where she like shoots sideways and then has the stabs the other guy the other way. Really cool. Like, really cool pose. Everything about it is badass.
Yeah.
We get this really cool like killer line from Morgan with like this like cool like witchy voice happening at the same time. And then of course Ahsoka and Sabine team up, with Sabine, rocking her new weapon combo against the troopers, while Ahsoka finishes off Morgan using her own witch's blade against her, cutting her with both her lightsaber and the witch's blade. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, that was such a sick move.
Yeah, like this like twist, turn, slice thing that she does.
Good.
Yeah.
Loved it.
Like the choreography there. Thrawn is then informed by the Great Witches that Morgan is dead, and she doesn't get much of not much pomp and circumstance here, because all he says is she has done what was required, which is like, what about her citation,
Yeah, exactly. No citation for her.
Yeah, yikes. Tough crowd when it comes to self-sacrifices for the Empire. Ezra, and maybe he's saying that because it's like he kind of knows that she wasn't fully on board with his plan, and it's just like, oh, just one less thing to deal with, one less headache. She does what she was required. She which was both die and stop the Jedi, right?
Exactly.
Ezra watches Sabine and Ahsoka finish off the remaining troopers on the tower as the ship continues to move further and further out. One of the dead trooper whose comms go off, he gets a message from some other troopers on the ship saying, LS-754, reinforcements have been dispatched to your location, which is like, to Ezra's glee, basically, who then puts on a voice, acknowledges that the troopers are on their way, and then drags away the body, presumably to put on their armor.
Classic Ezra fashion.
Classic, because it's like they would never in Rebels pass up an opportunity to put on some stormtrooper outfits. It was just like every chance they could. In fact, to the point where I think I've talked about this with you before, which is like, it felt like it was like almost too much. Like that was like their go-to move.
Yeah.
That like was super effective, like always working, and would be like, oh, here they go again, infiltrate another Imperial facility and or ship with the same old tactics. Someone would dress up in the captain's uniform, and a bunch of people would put on some stormtrooper stuff, and it would be no issue. And obviously they would often get caught and have to there'd be a firefight and stuff, but all the time. It did get on my nerves a little bit.
How else is he going to collect his stormtrooper outfits like he has?
It's true. He's got a really cool new helmet now.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I will say it is a fun callback to that old move. And like watching him drag the body away too is so funny.
He's going to put it on 100%. Yeah. We just knew. It's awesome.
Yeah, and it's like, I guess this is more to a point later on, but like he wears the full trooper uniform as he comes off the ship on Home One later.
Yeah.
It's like, why? Yeah. But I guess the idea is like maybe they felt like had to do that because it explained why he dragged that body away. But also, if he could have been wearing the outfit without the helmet, and it still would have worked. Yeah. So I don't know why they felt like that was necessary. It actually really irks me because it's like, it feels so forced to me to like go through this like period of like, oh, is it Ezra? We all know it's Ezra.
Yes,
yeah. Like, why? And in fact, why would he put himself into danger? He's got blasters pointed at him now because he just didn't want to take the helmet off. Like, for what reason? I'm sorry, I'm going off on like this whole tangent. We haven't even got there yet, but it's stupid.
As a cute little joke to Hera.
Oh yeah, fun little joke. Who's emotionally devastated by the fact that he's gone.
Yeah.
What a fun little joke he played on her.
Yeah.
Ugh.
But you're right. Yeah, they could have had him have the helmet off at least.
Okay. Yeah. Sorry. I had to say something. It's stupid. It doesn't make any sense. I would love them to explain that, but they never will. Anyway,
it looks cool, Julian. Okay?
Yeah, does it? Like again, it would have looked cool if he was wearing the trooper armor without the helmet too.
Yeah,
that would have still looked cool. I don't know. I'm all for the because it looks cool explanation, but this is not a good. And again, the suspense is already gone. We're in the epilogue at that point.
Yeah.
Like, just let's pay off these emotional storylines that we've been working on. So I don't know, a little bit of a self-own there. Yeah, self-inflicted injury, not needed. Anyway, we'll get to that later. Back with Ahsoka and Sabine. They make an escape while Thrawn targets the tower with his ship. The two Jedi reach the end of the tower, leaping off as they're chased by undead troopers. They're caught by the T6, and they continue to deflect blaster fire even as the tower collapses under the feet of the troopers. I thought it was a really cool visual. I thought it was really stitched together
cool.
well. Even if that was maybe like part of like the way that they used the volume or however they did it, I just thought that looked really good. It looked very practical. It looked very cool. Hard to get a real spaceship flying over a made-up tower, but this is about as close as you're going to get, right? Back inside, once they're back inside the ship, the T6, they attempt to chase the Chimera, and Hu Yang diverts power to the engines as the music really kicks in. I really love the score here. Felt very classic Star Wars chase music to me.
Yes, yeah.
Very cool. I can't speak highly enough about the theme that they use here. It's very awesome. It's like it really ramps up the stakes very quickly. Okay, they've survived this. We know that Ezra's on the ship. They need to catch up, get into the hangar, and then they'll solve that next problem when they get there.
Yeah.
Right? And somehow the Chimera, although it was moving super slow up until that moment, is now moving super fast. So they have a really good head start. So Thrawn opens a channel to the Jedi, I guess knowing that he's already succeeded, and with them like close on the tails, he said they get a report that they're closing in, that they're gonna maybe catch them, and then he has this speech where he commends them for their efforts, says that they're a worthy opponent. Meanwhile, Ahsoka tries to get a little bit more power out of the engines, but Thrawn continues saying that he regrets not being able to face off with them, face to face, and saying that maybe they never will, which is pretty funny.
Yeah.
And then he says he knows her because he knows her master. He knows their strategies, and that hers would be similar. And then wonders just how similar they might be and how similar they might become.
Right.
Really, I guess sussing out Ahsoka's weak spot, her soft spot, right?
Yeah. He's just kind of taunting her a little bit for sure.
Yeah, 100%. But also in a really effective way because you'd have to understand where she was coming from, and that was obviously this really this sensitive spot for her where she has a lot of self-doubt, and she's largely getting over that and working through it. But then having Thrawn poke at that obviously is kind of really hitting her buttons.
Yeah. Oh, of course.
And then says, quote, "Perhaps this is where a Ronin such as you belongs. Today, victory is mine. Long live the Empire." And then they jump away. Really love the use of the term Ronin here.
Me too.
I don't know if we've ever heard it used in Star Wars in this explicit way before.
Yeah.
I know that we've
been
talked
using
about
a lot of those terms in this series. I feel like, because what was it? The Boken was the other term,
which
too.
is another samurai term. Japanese. This is Ronin is also a Japanese term for a. I don't know exactly. I'm sure I'm going to butcher the definition, but it's essentially a samurai without a lone samurai.
Yeah, it's
without a clan or without a family.
Yeah.
And so it's really cool that they use it here. Obviously, we've referred to Ahsoka as Ronin, and other people have in the past, and it's really cool. The term Ronin is just badass in and of itself. Stories around it are cool. It works here. It's cool hearing it coming from Thrawn.
Yeah.
It's fun hearing him gloat for a minute. Again, gives you that. I was talking about this earlier, but really helps flesh out the idea of Thrawn being a worthy opponent. He gets a victory. I think that's important. They had to have had him get back to the main galaxy. There was no other way. So, and then the "Long live the Empire" line, which is fun because obviously we know that the Empire is long dead at this point. but he's kind of that last
Yes,
vestige of that kind of old thinking.
Which, I guess he's just still super pumped about the Empire.
Still super pumped about the Empire. Big Empire stan.
Yeah.
Thrawn jumps away as the T6 can't catch them, leaving Ahsoka, Sabine, and Huyang stranded. Now, this is where I feel like the main thrust of this all ends, and we get to the epilogue. Is there anything else you want to add, mention?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, well, let's get into it before you fall asleep.
Yeah, sorry.
Epilogue.
Caught me mid-yawn there.
Yeah, all good. So back on the planet, we see the Toady greet Sabine and Ahsoka as they approach their camp, their new trailer park. On the Howlers, I guess that they had left before, who are now safe.
Good thing.
With a T6 close behind us.
Dogs.
Yeah, never hurt the animals, so that's a nice thing. We take a moment as Ahsoka looks over to see Morai, her bird, her owl, chirping on a rock not far away before flying off, and she kind of ponders for a moment. What do you make of this moment?
This was like, I sat straight up because I was like, is that Morai? Because I know Morai kind of follows Ahsoka around, right? But we don't really understand necessarily how that happens because Morai is just around sometimes.
Yes.
And it's always been kind of thought that Morai is kind of the
resemblance
or the embodiment of the daughter, right?
Yep.
Who gave her life to save Ahsoka in the whole Mortis arc in Clone Wars. And I think that we see more references to Mortis.
Yes, we
later on in this episode. So
yes, we do.
That's really cool, and I wonder if that is kind of the sense that everyone's getting about this planet, like about why it's dangerous.
What's calling to her? Can't you see it?
Yeah. So I'm like, interesting. I'm like, okay, I was pumped. I always like seeing a Morai.
I think it lends a lot of credence to. So obviously, as you said, Morai follows her around, no matter where she goes, seemingly impossibly, right?
Yes, yeah.
Traveling through space and time, basically at a whim, right?
Yeah.
And it basically always around. The one time that she's around, that the Morai's around when she's not around, is the final shot of Clone Wars.
I was going to say that, yeah.
When Vader has her old lightsabers.
Yeah.
Which we could unpack that. In fact we have. You can go listen to our review of that. But it's interesting seeing Morai now, and by the way, there is a shot of Morai in Mando season 2.
Yes, yeah.
So that's cool. But seeing her here, kind of more explicitly, kind of not in the background or foreground and kind of hiding, but like explicitly calling attention to it, is interesting. I think it lends a lot of credence to the idea that I had before about using the world between worlds to travel back to the galaxy travel between these galaxies. Obviously, there's whatever way that Morai is using to travel between these galaxies to find her is maybe a way that they can use to get back to their home. So I think that's still on the table. So I'll pat myself on the back on that one if that one comes true. So I don't know, what else any other thoughts on the Morai of it all?
Well, I mean, just about them like being able to get back. I think I don't know. I don't see why they can't use the whales again. Like why?
I don't know. Like, maybe because they only go one way. They come here to die.
They don't just only go there to die because they all took off last time.
Yeah, but that's because Ahsoka asked them to help.
Yeah, I know, but she could be like, "Yo, want to give us a ride back?" I don't know. I don't see why the whales wouldn't help.
We'll see. I mean, that does seem like also seems a little cheap.
Too easy. Fair enough.
Yeah, it's like, well, we'll just take a ride back the same way we got here.
Yeah.
Right. But I could see that.
Yeah.
But I know. I mean, more just specifically about Morai. Specifically, why is she appearing here? What's the thinking?
I think it has something to do with Mortis and like that whole
the connection to those.
I just think it's got something to do because there's those statues that we see later, and I'm like, okay, like
that's the next scene.
Cool. Yeah, so I'm wondering because we don't really know where Mortis is, right? And even like they don't know because they get kind of sucked there, and then they all wake up and they're back on their ship, right?
It's got to be interdimensional, right? Like it's between space and time.
That's true, but maybe it's this planet. Maybe somehow they went to a whole different
This
galaxy.
they
and
were
got
here
shot
this whole
back.
time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe.
You never know, but yeah, I'm just like that was really cool seeing that because I'm like that's such a neat arc in Clone Wars, and if you haven't watched it, go watch it. It's very cool.
Yeah, it's really trippy. There's a bunch of weird stuff going on.
Really, really cool.
Including an older Ahsoka who's evil. It's very, very fun. Yeah.
But yeah, I don't know. I'm just like, I've always liked that arc and like that whole aspect to the Force was very cool. So
yeah.
I'm like, I would love to see more about that. So,
and I think your wish will come true. I think we're going to be able to see
because they're not going to drop stuff like that without it for no reason.
Yeah, no,
right?
100%
so,
not. No.
Yeah.
So over with Balin, who we didn't check in really at all this episode, off on his own. He's on the arm of a giant statue of the father,
so cool.
which I didn't clock the first time I watched, but when I watched it again, I was just kind of distracted by how obviously similar it is to almost a ripoff of Lord of the Rings, one might say.
Yeah.
So
you know, those, like big stone things outside the.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
I would see. You know what? I didn't notice at first. So it's
the son.
It's the father, the son, and the daughter's there too. But her head is missing.
Yes,
she's dead. So the daughter's statue was on the other side of him, but it's like broken because she's
yes.
Not
the statue of the father and the son, they're intact, but I was going to say that, but yeah, the daughter is not. It's
the daughter's not, which
destroyed.
is like, oh, interesting. And it's like I've always because again, her life force is in Ahsoka, right? So
right. So does maybe Ahsoka being here potentially create a scenario where that life force transfers back to the daughter in a more permanent way, and then Ahsoka maybe sacrifices herself to like restore the balance within the Force itself?
Maybe. I don't know. I don't know. We shall see. It's just, I mean, but the father also dies in.
That's a good point. That's a good point. That is a good point
too. So yeah, I don't know. We'll see. It's just
classic Anakin, literally messing with the pure embodiment of the Force.
Yeah,
you know, it's like, of course you would. He is the chosen one. You know.
Yeah. Also, how cool was Balin's cape?
Oh yeah, super cool.
Like I never really noticed it before. It's got that really cool like blue and like green on the back. I don't know. I was like,
yeah, like
cool.
it's like a not so much a cape as it is like a cowl.
Cowl,
or not or like this like a cowl I guess goes over your face. It's like a tunic or something. Like it's got this like it's like this. It's really cool.
Oh, that whole shot looked cool. And then I don't know what he's looking at in the distance. There's
it's some sort of yellow light off in the distant horizon.
It looked red to me. It looked like a
red. Red to you? Yeah. So Kara said the same thing. It looked yellow to me. I need to watch it again. I don't know.
Okay. It looked like a red light, like a beacon almost going straight.
Yeah. Coming like from the top of a mountain, like way off in the distance. Yeah. We'll see. I literally have no idea what that could be. Maybe a pathway into Mortis or a world between worlds somehow, or who knows? I really don't know at this point. Yeah. Meanwhile, but at least I guess what we have to assume is that that's what's calling to him, right? So, okay, so there's some physical manifestation of what's calling to him. It's off in the distance, and he's on the right track. Because the thing is, like the arm of the father points towards it, right?
Exactly.
So that's cool.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, Thrawn, very quickly in this case, arrives back in the other galaxy and is approaching Dathomir. We see the hold of the Chimera filled with whatever it is they took from Peridia, likely caskets, like we've been talking about. And that's it. We don't get any lines of dialogue or anything. No. It's just them approaching Dathomir. So, yeah, he's back in the main galaxy. There's no kind of like big arrival moment for the new galaxy. The New Republic is not yet aware of him. That kind of thing. So. A little I would have liked there to be a bigger splash there, but again, I think it's still pretty cool, given what we know. Over with the New Republic, Balin's ship is being escorted into the Home One command ship, essentially, by two A-Wings. Always love to see a good A-Wing reference. It lands with Hera, Chopper, and her soldiers there to meet it. A single stormtrooper emerges with their helmet on. Chopper goes over to investigate. The trooper affectionately pets Chopper, then removes his helmet to reveal that it was Ezra all along.
Of course.
Hera looks astonished. She even questions if it's Ezra, and he responds with, "Hi, Hera, I'm home," which is a nice, a nice simple response.
Ugh.
Yeah.
It's just the way he says hi, Hera. It's like, oh, like she was like his
little mom.
mom.
Yeah,
It's
and
just
it's
like
really
so
cute.
nice.
I think Mary Elizabeth Winstead puts in a great performance here in this little moment where she has
Yeah.
to feel surprised and sad and joy and love all at the same time. I
Yeah.
think it's very impressive. Um, I like how Chopper kind of like immediately figures out what's going
He just
on.
knows, yeah.
Yeah.
He's like,
I
oh,
bet
I've seen
again,
this before.
I will say one last time, why the fuck is he wearing that stupid helmet? It's
Yeah,
stupid.
I know.
And in fact, I think the moment would have been even more powerful if he emerged from that ship out of the mist of the psh, psh, psh thing that all ships do in
Yeah,
Star
because you
Wars.
can like show his legs first, and then
Right.
yeah, you're
Yeah.
right.
And then he could say, "Hi, Hera, I'm home," and then Chopper could
Yeah,
go brr, 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 and then run over, and
yeah,
like that's all that could all work, and I think even better without having to do this extremely forced and unnecessary reveal of the helmet. It just
yeah.
it
You're
just
right.
so stupid to me. I really it like it's a great episode, but it really puts a damper on it for me. This one little moment, just like it's just like, what the fuck were they thinking? I don't know. Anyway, we get a nice shot of the ghost parked in the background, looking pretty resplendent back there. Anyway, that's it. Any other comments on that reunion with Hera? Nice to see him
No,
back home.
it's just nice. It was just
Yeah.
very, yeah, it was very sweet. It
I
got
guess like
me.
I get since we're talking about what can possibly come next. I mean, he's now back with the New Republic, so he's going to get up to speed. But I guess whatever is going to happen next is going to be Ezra driven primarily
Yeah,
in the
yeah,
new galaxy, assuming Luke is still just off doing whatever the hell he's doing.
yeah,
And Han and Leia are not going to get involved. So it's going to be Hera, Mon Mothma, and Ezra as the
yeah.
representation of the Jedi back with the New Republic. That'll be interesting. Interesting to see how that all works out. And I just really have no idea what that dynamic. It's just gonna be so different than anything we've seen before,
Right.
right? Is he gonna be more involved or less involved with the New Republic, or how's that gonna work? I don't know.
Yeah.
That's an interesting question. What do you kind of think is gonna happen
Well,
there?
I'm curious with him, especially because it's been 10 years that he's kind of been on his own, right? So I feel like he's not going to want to have to deal with the bureaucracy of things and the politics of things.
Sure.
Like he's just going to be like, okay, well, either you listen and help, or like I'm just going to go do it because
Right.
this is insane. Yeah. So I guess we'll see. But again, like, are we going to see? In what medium are we going to see it?
Yeah, I mean, like, do we?
Yeah.
I feel like I honestly think it's weird if we went back to animation to pick up on this.
Oh,
I
that'd be
just
super
like,
weird. Yeah.
it would be. It's one thing to go from animation to live action. That's cool, or even to live action to animation, right? Like people are saying, like, would be really cool to see a Balin series or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah.
But to switch back and forth, Star Trek just did it. But I don't know. I don't. I just.
Yeah,
I
that would be
don't.
weird to switch back and forth.
I don't know. I
Yeah.
think it. I don't know if I like it. So yeah, I don't know. I just think that whatever they're gonna do next is gonna be live action.
Yeah, yeah.
That's what I think, and that their animation stuff, which isn't going away, will be focused on something else.
Yeah.
We have the final season of Bad Batch still to do, which I can't wait for that show, and then whatever comes after that, who knows?
Yeah.
Whatever they're doing in animation is really creative right now, and it would be a shame for them to be like pulled back into this like direct timeline, this Mando timeline. We have enough stuff going on there, and we can explore all sorts of different time frames where these characters are a different age or different characters altogether or different eras that you can't really do as easily in live action. We have all these characters now cast in live action,
Right.
appropriate age for this time frame. To not use those would be weird, in my opinion,
Yeah,
and a
I
lack of
agree.
kind of a waste. Anyway, back on Peridia, Ahsoka and Sabine have a final exchange. Ahsoka is looking wistfully off into the distance, and Sabine comes over to tell her that they're almost packed. I guess they're moving again. Unclear. Ahsoka congratulates her, but Sabine feels less than impressive, considering that Thrawn got away. But Ahsoka's message is about how she got Ezra home. That's why she should be proud, right? You came here on a mission to bring Ezra home, and you did. You got him home, and she says, like, well, hopefully. And to Ahsoka's response, she knows it to be true. She feels it in the Force.
Right.
She tells Sabine that Ezra is where he needs to be, and that they are also where they need to be, right? And then they look back into the toady and smile.
Yeah.
Which it's nice to say one might argue that time will tell on whether or not they are where they need to be, depending on what happens. But it's a nice sentiment. I think it's important to concentrate on the win here. With the silver lining is that they got Ezra home. Yeah. They might be stuck, but they're not helpless. Yeah. And they have their own resources, and there's people here that need their help, right?
Yeah.
So, by the way, I did forget to mention that Shin also had her own little moment.
Oh yeah.
Where she approaches the camp of bandits and then lifts her saber and ignites it. It looks really badass, by the way, I will admit.
It does, yeah.
But it's like what in stark contrast to how when Ahsoka and Sabine return to the Toady and they're greeted with like smiles and cheers, and they're obviously not wielding their sabers, and are approaching in peace, whereas Shin, feeling like she needs to command respect,
right? Yeah,
feels like she needs to show power and strength to this band of and maybe to a group of bandits. That's the way that you'd go about it.
I mean, yeah, that's kind of how I would approach bandits, being like, look at me, I'm tough too.
Right. Power respects power. So, they have to, she has to show that. I get to some degree, but it's interesting in comparison, kind of the different philosophy. And especially after how Ahsoka offered her hand. And now it's like, there's just like all these characters being in this one place together, right? With Baylan kind of being in that gray area, Shin really feeling like she wants to go down that dark path, but maybe feels conflicted. Very Ben-like, conflicted about the dark side. And then Ahsoka being this kind of pillar of positivity and hope and light that could potentially turn her back to the light. I think it's all interesting to me. So we'll find out.
Yeah.
Anyway, back with this final moment. Ahsoka then touches Sabine's shoulder, saying, "It's time. It's time to move on." What do you think she means here by "it's time to move on"? What do you think she's saying here specifically?
I mean, I think it's got multiple meanings, kind of how they always do here, where it's just like physically, it's time for them to not stay in the same spot that they're in right now. They got to keep moving, and it's just time to move on. Like they gotta. I guess move on. Like Thrawn got away, right? They couldn't catch him.
Yeah, come to terms with the fact that they lost. With it,
and they kind of just got to figure it out. Like they got to move forward and figure out a way to either get back home or I don't know, stay there forever.
Yeah, and wallowing in like failure isn't going to help them, right?
No,
so
of course not.
Turning the page and concentrating on what's in front of them, how they can help the Toady, how they can help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
But I think a part of it is also, it's time to move on from their bickering. It's time to move on from their disagreements, to come together. And it's time for her to move on from her feelings of revenge or sadness or anger towards what happened with her family, right?
Yeah.
Because they bring that up in this episode, and I think, saying it's time to move on to Sabine, I think probably has some meaning with, like, you need to get over it to some degree, for your own good, right? And saying it in a much nicer way that I'm saying it, but I think there's a layer of that too. So it's a nice sentiment. But just then, Sabine looks back, kind of confused, or as if someone's watching her. She's looking around. She feels something, and trying to spot something that's maybe hiding, right? She says to Ahsoka, "It's nothing. Just shadows in the starlight." And then she turns around and heads back. Ahsoka, taking this in, turns around, looks back as well. The music starts to swell here with what seems to be a variant of Ahsoka's theme. Although I could be wrong about that, to be honest. It could be something new. She takes a beat, considers things for a moment. I want to say there's a little smile there, but I don't think she does. I think her face stays pretty much the same. But as the camera pulls back, we get the reveal that Anakin, as a Force ghost, was watching her all along.
Yeah,
it's really, and this is really, and as I said at the top, I was like, this got to me because it's like this Ahsoka's being a master. She's helping her Padawan. She's being there for her, as she said she would be, right? And she's using the lessons that Anakin taught her. She's worked through her emotions of her sense of failure and fear of either being like him or being the reason he became that way, and has come, found some peace in her life, and she's able to look past their failure with Thrawn and really just concentrate on the here and now.
Yeah.
And although it's unclear if she can see Anakin. I get the sense that she can't yet here.
Yeah, I get this. Yeah, I don't think she can.
Kind of similar to kind of like Obi-Wan, like Qui-Gon having watched over Obi-Wan for so long, but he couldn't see him.
Yeah.
Right. And then this like direct visual connection to that, all that heritage I just talked about, and all these lessons that she had to learn, to see that Anakin is there watching over her still and is proud of her. And it just like it really, I'm gonna tear up again now. It just really hit for me. I really liked it.
Yeah,
so
it's really good. It was just like a perfect little way to like kind of top it off. Like I was just like, I wasn't expecting it.
It's a nice little cherry.
Oh, I love it. And it's like he's still there. He's still watching her. So it's like she still has help and she still has like connection to like her old galaxy, right? Like she's not alone. So
yes, exactly. Well, she's not alone because all those other people are
I
there,
know,
but also she's not alone, like spiritually,
right?
Yeah,
like the master's still there.
Like it is a nice. I wasn't expecting that. I was a little confused at first. Like, what is she talking? Like, what is going on here?
Right.
And then as it pulls back and we get that little like electrified blue shoulder, I'm like, ooh, this is really. I got to admit though, this is the worst that the de-age Anakin looks. Like he looked better he looked better in like as a real person and as a hologram. As a Force ghost, he looked not great. His face specifically, but minor gripe. It still worked for me. Ultimately, these visual effects it all boils down to, did it hit emotionally? Does it work for that purpose? And for me, it does. And so I can look past that. Like if I got distracted by his face and I kind of got sucked out or pulled out of that moment, that's where it's a problem. But that doesn't happen to me here.
No.
And in fact, instead, it totally lands. I'm glad that we didn't have to overcomplicate it. We just end there. We cut to credits. We get this beautiful new song playing over the credits that is like, it's got this twinge of sadness but also triumph in it. It almost has this like World War II esque theme where, these war themes have this idea of sadness because there's death and destruction,
right,
and loss, but also triumph over evil and victory, right? And to blend those two is very impressive. To create a really good war theme in that way is difficult. I don't know if that's what he was going for, but it definitely works for me. No stinger. We don't get any, Ahsoka will return or a special Boba Fett scene at the end, like we did Mando season 1. So, I don't have any notes for that. That last scene's great. Everything that works for me in this episode takes place in this scene, and every scene. I guess the scene where Ezra's building his lightsaber, and the one immediately following that, and that those are the most strong emotional beats of the episode and the whole season. It lands. There's a nice bow on it. There's a lot of open threads of where things can go from here. I don't know. I'm stoked. I'm stoked for more.
Me too. I know. I just can't wait to find out where we're going to get more from. So,
yeah, I just don't know. I don't know. Is it another series? Is it Ahsoka season 2? Is it the movie?
Yeah, I don't know.
Time will tell. I think we'll find out pretty soon.
I hope so. Yeah.
I think we'll find out pretty soon. I don't think you can leave on a note like this and then not give fans some clarity on how this specific story will be resolved.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Hey, we're going to renew Ahsoka for this, or we're going to pick this story up in another place, or whatever. Whatever they want to do, I think there needs to be some clarification. So,
yeah.
And if they don't, if it's like if we're still asking, oh, I really hope we're getting a Ahsoka season 2, and it's the middle of next year, that's a problem. It's a big problem. But I don't think we're going to get there. So, any final thoughts on the season as a whole, or predictions, or predictions for the future?
See, I don't know. That's kind of what I'm saying. Is like I don't know where to go from here, because I just need a little more information from our our lovely friends at Disney Lucasfilms.
Yeah.
To give us a little nugget to tell us where we're gonna go next. So
Well, I mean, we have Skeleton Crew next. I don't feel like it's going to tie into the story.
No, probably.
I'll go out on a limb here and assume that Skeleton Crew, which is a bunch of kids and an old dude,
right?
not going to be tied into the Peridia storyline. Could be wrong. I'm willing to admit that I could be wrong there, and would be happy to be wrong in this case. I don't know. I suspect that we're going to do two parallel tracks. We're going to have this new war against the return of Thrawn and the resurgent Empire and the New Republic, and that's going to happen in that movie, right?
Yeah.
And I think there'll be some setup for that going into it with a variety of other series that aren't announced yet, right? Whether it's Mando season 4 or it's something else, more Book of Boba Fett, whatever that's in that timeline, in that galaxy, and can play with those characters as they prepare for war against Thrawn, right? And I would like to see, by the way, some space combat. Like, we need some capital ship on capital ship action. It's been too long.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll see that.
So I think that's going to happen in parallel to whatever's happening with Ahsoka and her story on Peridia, with all these characters that are over there and the kind of the stage that they have set, is going to happen separately. Presumably in Ahsoka season 2. That will likely at the end bring them back just in time for the movie. Maybe that would be the hope, but I mean, otherwise we're pretty well staged, right? I mean, they're going to have to bring the witches back, so that's going to create a whole new subplot, and how that ties into the Shadow Council and the Empire stuff. That might be interesting.
Yeah.
Right now, Mando as a character is kind of like in a pretty tidy spot, right? Just hanging out on his planet.
I don't think it'll be. Yeah, I don't think it'll be on Mando.
Right.
Honestly,
there's some questions about what's going to happen with the Luke's, Leia's, and Han's of it all, right? Obviously, the Heir to the Empire book really has those characters prominently featured. Are they going to be prominently featured in the movie? And if so, I feel like it's probably a good time to bring in either recast or whatever you're going to do that ahead of time to kind of take some temperature and set the stage for their reappearance in the film. So that's kind of feel like that's got to happen. We need to follow up with Ezra and this Hera stuff. So some sort of more kind of direct, and maybe bring in Zeb back into the fold, and Callus and those characters.
Right,
See if we can't maybe have a direct Rebels sequel that maybe ties into that stuff. I don't know. I mean, that's the thing. There's just a lot of open.
It could go anyway
questions.
At this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was like, that's the thing. I was like, it's pretty open ended right now, but I'm excited either way. I think wherever it goes, it'll be good.
Yeah, and then on the Ahsoka side, it's like, well, they're got to have to catch up with Baylan. They need to figure out what's going on with Shin, maybe the converter, blah, blah, blah. There's all sorts of things that are going on there. That I feel like I really don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be very mystical Jedi stuff. So it's, forces of good and evil, etc. I'm all very into that. And I'm fine with that happening separately from the war stuff.
Yeah.
Putting the war back in Star Wars. So, yeah, I don't know. I really, just on a kind of a final thought here, I really enjoyed this season. I thought it was really exciting.
Yeah.
I thought it really brought it. It didn't shy away from traditional lightsaber duels and pulling in kind of some of these more traditional Star Wars tropes and playing in that mystical space that's been so long since we got to explore it in earnestness. And there's some low points. It's not perfect. Nothing is Andor, but I would say I really, really enjoyed getting back to that kind of lightsaber on lightsaber style stuff and everything that goes around with it. And kind of like the fallout of people who don't have the Force having to deal with it, bringing Thrawn back in, although I'm not in love with his look. I think they can refine it a little bit for the movie or for whatever next time we see it. And I think maybe he gets a nice, fresh, crisp uniform, and that helps a little bit. I think really brings a lot of interesting weight back. I think there is still a bit of like this underlying sense of like, well, this is all kind of for naught because we have to lead into Force Awakens and what
yeah.
that leads to some degree. But at the same time, there's still plenty that's happening off screen in those during those events to tell interesting stories, and hopefully we can do that, right? So there's a lot of, for me, a lot of optimism coming off this series. Obi-Wan had a lot of problems. Not so, as I mentioned, obviously not so much with Andor, but didn't hit necessarily with the same crowd. So I feel like they stabilized themselves a bit now with the series. Really interesting to see what Skeleton Crew can bring, and if it feels like it's maintaining this momentum, or if it's maybe like a bit of a diversion. But yeah, I really did dig this series, and I'm glad it was fun to cover it, despite all the challenges that we had in doing so.
Yeah.
Final thoughts?
I agree. No, I would say I would agree with all of that. I think we can sit here and speculate probably for hours. I just want to say I'm excited. So I like the series as a whole. I like Ahsoka. She's my favorite kind of Star Wars character. So I was pumped to see her get her time. So yeah, I would like to see more of it. So I'm hoping we get at least, I don't know. I'm hoping for a season 2 is what I'll say.
Oh, I think there's no doubt we get a season 2. Yeah. And I've had this figure of Ahsoka on my desk this entire time, coaching me through our shows since the beginning. So she's gonna have to go back on the shelf back there eventually, but for now she's got a spot on the desk. It was great. It was really fun. I look forward to covering the next show. Hopefully we can find a way to squeeze in a bonus episode or two before then. We don't know when it's premiering yet. I am really stoked for The Acolyte also, but that's a little further out. Lots to cover still. Never mind when Bad Batch Season 3 comes out or any of that stuff. But stay tuned to this feed to keep up with everything we're doing on the Star Wars front. If we do something special for Star Wars, I'll always post it here. But I guess in general, in between now and then, if you're looking for something a little bit more generalized, you can head over to the main feed, the Tower of Babel podcast feed. You're going to find everything that we do there. In fact, by the way, I would recommend, and I should have mentioned this at the top, I was recently on another podcast, the Daily DVR podcast. Friend of the show, Axel, invited me on to talk about a variety of things. Mainly, though, we talked about Ahsoka, a little bit more general conversation, obviously not so spoilery. Kind of just talked about what we were feeling about the series so far, and some of the kind of the bumpiness of some of the elements of it. I'm still very curious to see what the normies felt about this series when it's all over. As someone who's not a normie, it's very close to this. I don't have that same perspective, so I'll be putting my ear to the ground and figuring that out. But seems like off the conversation with Axel that it's being relatively well received. Anyway, I posted the entire episode from their feed onto ours, so you can listen to it there. But I highly recommend you go and subscribe there as well. And we also talk about a few other things. We talk about the end of the writer's strike. We talk about ads coming to Amazon Prime. We talk about Canadian football, of all things. So there's it's a good conversation. If you enjoyed this, you'll probably enjoy that. And that's over on the main feed, Tower of Babel podcast feed, which you can find over at towerbabel.ca/subscribe, where you can find all the stuff that we do. Alrighty then. I don't think I have any final comments other than subscribe to the Patreon, patreon.com/towerbabelcast, and that we'll be back with more small screen Star Wars relatively soon, but we'll go on a short break over the next few weeks as I'll be away this coming weekend, which is timing is working well for that. Then I'll be in Costa Rica in November, so there'll be some intermittent podcasting during that time, and then we get into the holiday season, and that's going to be fun too. So, and typically there's at least one fun Star Wars thing happening around holidays, so maybe we'll get a special episode in around then. But either way, stay tuned to the feed. Twitter is a good way to keep up with what we're doing, at Tower Babelcast on Twitter. And we'll be back soon with more small screen Star Wars. Until then, may the Force be with you. We'll talk to you soon.